Chapter 1209. Exposed. After returning to the clan, Jianshan learned that Changyang Zhu Yunkong had already left. He went to Mercenary City all by himself and left behind a single sentence: he would not return unless he became a Saint King. Jianshan knew that what had happened in the Protector clan must have affected Changyang Zhu Yunkong dearly as well. He wanted to quickly increase his strength since only Saint Kings had the right to speak before the Protector clans. Jianshan spent an entire day in the clan with his brother. 2 days had already passed since he had made the agreement to go to the Bloodsword sect in 3 days, so only 1 day remained. The morning of the next day, Jianshan convinced Yu to stay in the clan. After that, he asked Rui Jin to construct a space gate to the sea before leaving all by himself. Jianshan gained his bearings above the boundless ocean before flying toward 3 Saint Island as quickly as possible. Shangguan Aojian's chubby, white face constantly flickered through his head. Jianshan still felt that it was unrealistic that he suddenly had a son. Never had he thought that the heavenly enchantress would actually give birth to a child of his and that the child would possess the innate chaotic body. At this moment, Shangguan Aojian currently sat on a white boulder on 3 Saint Island. His eyes were closed and he seemed to be amidst cultivation. Qin Qin, Shao Qian, Xiao Yu, and the heavenly enchantress all stood right in front of him, keeping their eyes on him. Their gazes were filled with affection and unhidable concern. At this moment, Shangguan Aojian slowly opened his eyes. He could not help but wonder when he saw his 3 nervous sisters and his mother. He scratched his head and loudly asked, "Mum and sisters, why are you all staring at me?" Qin Qin, Shao Qian, Xiao Yu, and the heavenly enchantress all became surprised when Shangguan Aojian had opened his eyes. Shao Qian asked in shock, "Xiao Bao, you just ingested a pill refined from a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource an hour ago. Has all its medicinal effects just leaked away?" "Oh no. The effects of the pills on Xiao Bao have already begun to decline. Back then, Xiao Bao could last for half a day before all the medicinal effects leaked away completely when he ingested a 1,000-year-old heavenly resource. Yet now, a pill crafted from a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource only takes an hour. This is a pill that can allow utter cripples to undergo a metamorphosis, but it's actually completely useless to Xiao Bao. Is Xiao Bao fated to spend the rest of his life like an ordinary person?" Xiao Yu sighed. Shangguan Aojian stood up on the rock defiantly when he heard what Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu had said. With his hands on his hips, he loudly dud, "Sister Xiao Qian, Sister Xiao Yu, I'm not a cripple of cultivation. I have the most strongest innate chaotic body in the world, and the effects haven't leaked away. I've absorbed them all." With that, Xiao Bao seemed to think of something. He beamed with joy and announced, "And I have a name now. It's Shangguan Aojian." Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and Qin Qin all became curious. Xiao Qian said, "The most strongest innate chaotic body." "Xiao Bao, what innate chaotic body? Where did you hear that from? Why have I never heard you say that before? And Master didn't seem to give you the name Shangguan Aojian." Xiao Yu pinched Shangguan Aojian's cheeks playfully. She stared at him with her bright eyes and said, "Yeah, Xiao Bao. Shangguan Aojian definitely wouldn't be a name from Master, or Master would have told us for sure. Xiao Bao's so smart. I think you gave yourself the name, right?" Xiao Qian giggled. In that case, Xiao Bao also came up with that innate chaotic body. The 3 women chatted around Xiao Bao. They all showed a great amount of affection toward Xiao Bao. "No, it's all from Dad," Shangguan Aojian's cheeks swelled. He wanted to explain to them that the innate chaotic body was something his father told him and that his name was from his father as well. He even wanted to tell his 3 sisters that he had a father. "Enough, Xiao Bao, eat this 10,000-year-old ginseng." However, the heavenly enchantress covered up his mouth before he could finish what he was saying. She then pulled out an ancient ginseng from her space ring. Xiao Bao's eyes lit up when he saw the heavenly resource. He immediately forgot what he was saying and wolfed down the heavenly resource. He sat down on the rock again after consuming it and entered a state of cultivation. Although Xiao Bao had never finished what he was saying, Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and Qin heard him mention the word dad clearly. They all became suspicious. Xiao Bao's actually just mentioned that he has a father. Have I heard wrong? Master, what is this about? Why do I feel that Xiao Bao's changed so much after your trip out with Xiao Bao and that his name has changed for no reason? Xiao Yu asked the heavenly enchantress. She was extremely curious. The heavenly enchantress' expression became rather unnatural as the light in her eyes flickered. She became a little fearful of making eye contact with Xiao Yu, so she just turned around and said in an indifferent manner, I met a great master during the trip and learned through luck that Xiao Bao's not a cripple, but in possession of the innate chaotic body. At the same time, the master passed on a cultivation method to him. However, his special constitution requires large amounts of heavenly resources to be consumed to create an extremely tremendous amount of energy to cultivate. Oh. Really? Xiao Bao's really not a cripple. That's just fantastic. Xiao Yu and Xiao Qian both became delighted by the news. Only Qin glanced past the heavenly enchantress back in Xiao Bao's face from time to time as the light in her eyes flickered. An hour passed very quickly and Xiao Bao opened his eyes again after refining the heavenly resource. He looked at the heavenly enchantress eagerly and said, Mum, more. Be a good boy, Xiao Bao. You can't eat too many heavenly resources, so that's enough for today. You can eat more tomorrow. Xiao Qian could not help but worry seeing how Shengguan Aojian wanted to eat more. Eating too many heavenly resources would leave after effects. The heavenly enchantress smiled as she looked at Xiao Bao in love. Just as she was about to pull out some more heavenly resources, her expression suddenly changed and she vanished with a flash. 10 kilometers away from the island, Jian Shen was stopped by the heavenly enchantress who had suddenly appeared. She stared at him cautiously, appearing right in front of his path to 3 Saint Island. Why have you come? The heavenly enchantress showed no goodwill, as if she did not welcome Jian Shen at all. Mixed emotions flooded Jian Shen inside as he looked at the heavenly enchantress. After learning that she had given birth to his child before, Jian Shen actually felt like he had no idea how to confront her. I've come to see my son. A while later, Jian Shen still ended up declaring his intentions. Return. 3 Saint Island no longer welcomes you. The heavenly enchantress turned Jian Shen away without any second thought. She did not leave any room for discussion. Xiao Bao seemed to sense something back on 3 Saint Island. He suddenly stood up from the rock and turned to face Jian Shen's direction. Although he was over 20 kilometers away, he could still clearly see Jian Shen. He immediately began to smile happily. Dad. I'm here. Although Xiao Bao had only seen Jian Shen once before, he behaved like they were extremely close. He jumped up and down on the rock and waved his hands at Jian Shen, afraid that Jian Shen would miss him. Dad. I'm here, Xiao Bao constantly called out. To everyone's surprise, his gentle voice could travel extremely far away, actually making it to over 20 kilometers and continuing to spread even further. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu became stunned. They stared at Xiao Bao blankly as disbelief plastered across their faces. They had clearly heard Xiao Bao call for his dad. They doubted whether they had heard correctly or not. The heavenly enchantress' expression changed as well when she heard Xiao Bao's calls. A sliver of worry flickered through her eyes. She had never thought that Xiao Bao would still be able to recognize Jian Shen from so far away. Chapter 12:10. Father and son. Jian Shen's face immediately lit up in joy and excitement when he heard Xiao Bao. He immediately used the illusory flash. He took a step and hurried toward the mountain, leaving behind only an afterimage. The heavenly enchantress realized what he was doing and watched him rapidly approach the island. A struggle appeared in her eyes. She was confident that she could stop Jian Shen from reaching the island, or even stop him from getting anywhere near the island. However, that would mean that she had to fight Jian Shen. At the same time, she was unable to bring herself to stop Jian Shen. In that moment, the heavenly enchantress felt rather conflicted. Jian Shen moved very fast, traversing over 20 kilometers in an instant. While the heavenly enchantress hesitated, Jianshan reached the island, so now it was impossible for her to stop him even if she wanted to. Dad, you've finally come. I miss you so much, Xiaobao happily exclaimed. He jumped off the rock in a nimble fashion and ran over to Jianshan with his arms open. He said, "Huggy." A sliver of never-before-seen tender affection appeared on Jianshan's face as he stared at Xiaobao's chubby and extremely cute face. He picked him up in one stroke and was so excited that he was left speechless. Qin stared at Jianshan and Xiaobao with mixed emotions. Although she had once guessed that Xiaobao's identity would be like this, it was only a guess. She felt a dull ache at the bottom of her heart now that it had become a reality. Jianshan's arrival should have been something worth smiling for Qin, but the outcome was the exact opposite. Qin could not raise her spirits no matter how hard she tried, and she became depressed instead. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu failed to notice Qin's change. They had been stunned by what Xiaobao had said as they stared who he was calling Jianshan Dad so affectionately. All their thoughts had stopped. Only a long while later did Xiao Qian finally return to her senses. She would never have believed that Jianshan was Xiaobao's father. She thought Xiaobao had called him the wrong name, so she quickly corrected him. "Xiaobao, you should call Master Jianshan brother or uncle and not dad. You can't use dad so casually." Xiaobao clung tightly onto Jianshan's neck. He felt like his father's bosom was even more comfortable than his mother's, as if his father had something that his mother lacked. "You're lying. He's clearly my dad, so I'm not going to call him big brother or uncle. I'm only going to call him dad." "Only dad," Xiaobao pouted and unhappily replied to Xiao Qian. At this moment, Xiao Yu returned to her senses as well. She glanced past Jianshan and Xiaobao's faces and slowly became surprised. She said, "Xiao Qian, why do I feel like Xiaobao and Master Jianshan's appearances are similar in some areas?" With that, Xiao Qian immediately looked closer. Now that the two of them were together, she had indeed found them to be rather similar after comparing their appearances. Xiao Qian immediately became astounded. "Xiao Yu, now that you mention it, I feel like they just look far too similar as well. If it weren't for the fact that I know Xiaobao's origins, would suspect, reaching there, Xiao Qian suddenly felt that there was something wrong. The two of them had heard about Xiaobao's origins from their master and had no idea that Xiaobao's true identity was different from what the heavenly enchantress had told them. Now that Xiaobao constantly called Jianshan Dad after seeing him and the fact that the two of them looked far too similar, just like father and son, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Sister Xiao Qian, Sister Xiao Yu, you're actually working with Mum to trick me, telling me that I have no dad. I actually do have a dad. I've already found my dad, Xiaobao said in irritation. Through his childish voice, his unhappiness for Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu was clearly disclosed. Even his arms around Jianshan's neck tightened. "Xiaobao, is it really true? Is Master Jianshan really?" Xiao Yu covered her mouth as she stared at Xiaobao and Jianshan with widening eyes. Disbelief was spelt across her face as her heart churned. Xiaobao's not a liar, and Dad has already given me a new name. It's Shangguan Aojian, Xiaobao confidently replied. Impossible. That can't be true. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu both became shocked. They refused to believe that Xiaobao's father was Jianshan. Who was his mother then? However, they already had an answer in their heads because of the way their master treated Xiaobao as well as the fact that the heavenly enchantress' gaze toward him would be filled with motherly love. They just refused to believe it. The heavenly enchantress returned to the island. She glanced over Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu with her enchanting eyes and sighed inside. She could already tell that Xiaobao's true identity had been exposed from their expressions. Master, Xiaobao's origins. Xiao Qian continued to look at the heavenly enchantress in disbelief in attempt to obtain an answer. The heavenly enchantress' gaze flickered and avoided them. At this moment, she was actually unwilling to meet her three disciples' eyes. She seemed very calm on the surface, but she was a complete mess down below. "Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, Qin, you are dismissed," the heavenly enchantress said coldly and emotionlessly. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu both became wide-eyed. Although they never finished asking, their meaning was obviously conveyed very clearly. However, what really surprised them was that not only did their master avoid the topic, she was avoiding them as well. They had been with their master for many years, but this was the first time they had ever seen her like that. Senior Xiao Qian, Senior Xiao Yu, let's go. Qin went up to grab Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu's hands, pulling them away with her. Although the matter had never been confirmed, they already knew the answer inside. They just refused to believe it. The three of them vanished very quickly. The heavenly enchantress then coldly looked at Jian Chen. With a slight bit of anger in her eyes, she said, "What are you doing here?" At this moment, the heavenly enchantress was indeed extremely annoyed. Jian Chen's arrival was without warning and had actually exposed Xiao Bao's identity to her three disciples. She no longer knew how to face them in the future. "I've obviously come to see my son. As a father, I have the responsibility to care for my child," smiled Jian Chen. He did not mind the heavenly enchantress' attitude at all. "Dad, just stay here in the future. You can be with Mom every day, and I can see you every day as well," Xiao Bao said. His face was basically pressed against Jian Chen's while his hot breath tickled Jian Chen's cheek. Jian Chen felt deeply moved by Xiao Bao's eyes, which were brimming in hope. At that moment, he actually felt like he could not turn down Xiao Bao's request, tempted to just agree to it. After all, he had only learned he had a son when Xiao Bao was already 3 years old. He had never shown any love to Xiao Bao in the past and did not even know he had a son at all. He felt sorry for not knowing about Xiao Bao. However, Jian Chen had his reasons. He knew he could not, well at the very least, not right now. "Xiao Bao, I can't spend every day with you right now because I have a lot of important things to attend to. However, I can promise you that once I deal with everything, I'll spend every day with you." "All right?" Jian Chen gently replied with eyes filled with love. "All right, then I'll wait for you with Mum." "Hey you." "Yeah you." Another survey. Chapter 12:11, Nubis emerges. Jian Chen had come to 3 Saint Island this time to visit Xiao Bao as well as deliver some cultivation resources to him. Xiao Bao was in possession of the innate chaotic body, so the resources he required were just as extravagant as what Jian Chen needed. When Jian Chen first began cultivating the chaotic body, he had the assistance of the sword spirits. They could refine ruler armaments into pure strands of chaotic force for him to absorb and pave the path of cultivation for him, allowing him to advance quickly. However, Xiao Bao was just too young even though he had the innate chaotic body. At the same time, he did not have sword spirits that could refine ruler armaments for him into chaotic force, so he could only use various resources like heavenly resources. Jian Chen never considered cultivation through absorbing the energy of the world. Chaotic force was different from ordinary energies. Refining a single strand would require tremendous amounts of energy. If he wanted to continue by absorbing energy of the world, he would advance extremely slowly even if it was 100 times more abundant in this world. Back then, Jian Chen had broken through to the first layer of the chaotic body by absorbing the energy that Shaoling had gathered after 100,000 years. Although all the energy was casually collected by Shaoling and not due to a certain method, it was still enough to give an idea of just how much energy Jian Chen had consumed to reach the first layer. In order for Xiao Bao to properly begin cultivating, Jian Chen pulled out 2 Class 9 monster cores, 10 Class 8 monster cores, and the other Class 7, 6, and 5 monster cores he had obtained from the Heaven's Incense School from his space ring. He also took out all the heavenly resources in his space ring. Jian Chen's space ring had suddenly become half empty after removing all those items, but he did not feel pained at all. Class 9 monster cores. You actually have Class 9 monster cores. Even the heavenly enchantress involuntarily made an outburst when she saw the monster cores. Class 9 monster cores could only appear within the bodies of Class 9 magical beasts that had reached the level of Saint Emperors. Even the remains of Saint Emperors could not match their value. They were basically items of legends on the Tianyuan continent. Even with the heavenly enchantress' mental fortitude, she could not help but have a different expression when he pulled out 2 Class 9 monster cores in one stroke. What made the Heavenly Enchantress even more astounded was other than the 2 Class 9 monster cores, he had 10 Class 8 monster cores as well. Class 8 monster cores were basically non-existent on the continent, just like Class 9 monster cores where it was basically impossible to come across any. The Heavenly Enchantress began to suspect whether Jian Chen had robbed a protector clan when he pulled out so many monster cores in one stroke. This was because no organization could pull out so many high-class monster cores other than the 10 protector clans and mercenary city. Xiao Bao will consume extremely vast amounts of energy when he cultivates. These items should be enough to support him for a period of time. I'll pass them all to you, and I'll have to trouble you with looking after him. Jian Chen stored all the items into another space ring and passed it to the Heavenly Enchantress. He obviously would not give all these valuable items to Xiao Bao. He was still a child after all, and it would be a huge loss if he lost them. The Heavenly Enchantress did not turn down the space ring. She accepted it without saying anything more. Ever since Xiao Bao had obtained a cultivation method of the chaotic body from the sword spirits, she had witnessed the rate at which he consumed the heavenly resources. A 10,000-year-old heavenly resource would only take him an hour to fully absorb. The speed was terrifyingly fast. And after consuming so many 10,000-year-old heavenly resources, Xiao Bao did not undergo any significant changes. His dantian was still devoid of energy, which was more than enough to demonstrate just how vast the energy needed for the chaotic body was. The toughness of the chaotic body is nowhere near ordinary. Xiao Bao is in possession of the innate chaotic body, so he has some natural advantages. He will not suffer from any backlashes when consuming heavenly resources or refining monster cores, so you have no need to worry about Xiao Bao consuming heavenly resources and monster cores too quickly. Jian Chen explained more about the chaotic body to the Heavenly Enchantress, allowing her to have a rough understanding of Xiao Bao's constitution. Then when can Xiao Bao cultivate the chaotic force that you've mentioned? The Heavenly Enchantress asked. Although she was extremely unwilling to talk to Jian Chen, she still cared very much for her child. She needed to understand the chaotic force for her son. You need to forge and refine the chaotic body before cultivating chaotic force. Xiao Bao is still at the stage of forging, so all the energy will be absorbed by his body. After he completes this process, he will finally be able to cultivate chaotic force. You don't understand the chaotic body very much, so don't interfere with Xiao Bao's cultivation. He already has the cultivation method, so as long as he follows it, everything will obviously flow naturally, said Jian Chen. Jian Chen stayed on the island for most of the day before leaving. During that time, he basically explained everything regarding the constitution to Xiao Bao and also told him about his experiences and all his knowledge regarding cultivation he had gained over the years. Once Jian Chen left the island and stood above the sea, did he realize that he did not bring a Saint King with him. Without a Saint King, there would be no space gate, and he was over 10 million kilometers away from the Jessen Kingdom right now. If he flew, it would take him at least 10 days or half a month to get back. Do I have to go back and ask the Heavenly Enchantress to construct a space gate for me? Jian Chen frowned. He was troubled. There were some slight discrepancies in his relationship with the Heavenly Enchantress, so he really could not bring himself to return to ask her to send him back home. Jian Chen helplessly sighed as he stared at the boundless ocean. Just when he had no idea what he should do, the artifact spirit's voice rang through his head. His face immediately lit up in joy, and without any hesitation, he disappeared into the artifact space. Boom! Before Jian Chen could even make out his surroundings, he heard a deafening rumble. At the same time, a vast pressure that originated from the surroundings filled the space. A Saint-tier battle skill. Jian Chen shivered inside. He immediately understood that someone was using a Saint-tier battle skill from the vast pressure and that the user was powerful as well, at least a Saint King. Master, your friend who has always been studying the Saint-tier battle skill has emerged from seclusion. The artifact spirit appeared silently beside Jian Chen and politely informed him. As expected, a person shining with a golden, blinding light could be seen 1,000 meters away in the air. Above him, a serpent-like dragon swam about. Although the dragon was condensed from energy, it too shone with golden light and possessed a vast pressure. At this moment, the dragon roared at the sky before turning into a golden blur. It charged toward the ground at an unbelievable speed. Boom! With another rumble, the ground shook violently. Huge cracks littered the surroundings in 100 kilometers radius, while 100-meter wide, bottomless hole appeared there. The golden dragon did not dissipate after producing such a shocking strike. It flew back as a golden streak of light, returning above the person's head. Ha ha ha, I, the great Nubis, have finally succeeded. A crazy laugh rang through the surroundings and spread out in all directions. Even from 1,000 kilometers away, Jian Shen could clearly hear the arrogant and joyful voice. Hey you! Yeah you! Another survey. Chapter 12:12. Visiting the Bloodsword Sect. Jian Shen could not help but smile. He was filled with joy inside as well. He had never thought that Nubis, who had been locked up for several years and had been devoting all his time to studying a Saint-tier battle skill, would finally come out at this moment, and that he would have modified the Saint-tier battle skill into one that he could use himself. Jian Shen was happy for Nubis' success. The pressure that permeated the surroundings shocked him in particular. Although he had not personally experienced a strike from the modified Saint-tier battle skill, he could tell from the presence alone that the battle skill was not weaker than an attack from a 7th heavenly layer Saint King. The huge golden dragon above Nubis began to revolve quickly again. Pulses of energy rippled out as the pressure in the surroundings began to gradually increase. Jian Shen knew that Nubis had not finished casting the skill when he felt this. Nubis was about to direct it toward the ground again. If Jian Shen was outside, he obviously would not do anything about it, but the artifact space was his territory. He did not wish for it to become a mess because of Nubis, so he hurriedly yelled, Nubis, stop. If you want to try the Saint-tier battle skill, go outside. Don't do it here. Ha 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 ha, Jian Shen. I, the great Nubis, have finally succeeded in modifying that Saint-tier battle skill for the sea race into one that's specific to me. This Saint-tier battle skill has been modified according to myself, so no other human or magical beast can use it other than silver-striped golden snakes. Jian Shen, taste the power of the Saint-tier battle skill. Nubis laughed aloud. He was extremely excited and proud. With that, the dragon above his head roared and shot toward Jian Shen like a golden streak of lightning. Jian Shen became stern. Nubis was a 3rd heavenly layer Saint King, so Jian Shen actually felt pressured facing a battle skill from him. Not only had the golden dragon locked onto Jian Shen's presence, preventing him from dodging, even the space around him became thick. Not only did he feel like he was standing in treacle, a heavy pressure was also pressing against him from all directions as if a huge mountain lay above him. His mobility was greatly limited. Jian Shen's indifferent gaze became sharp in that moment. A great battle intent began to radiate from him. Although Jian Shen did not fear Nubis' Saint-tier battle skill, he was still cautious. Strands of chaotic force surged within him, quickly fusing into every inch of his flesh. Jian Shen used everything that his chaotic force could provide, forcefully pushing back the space around him by 3 inches. The Emperor armament had already appeared silently in his right hand. Violent and destructive chaotic force swirled around the sword. All that was left where Jian Shen had been standing was an afterimage now. He advanced instead of retreating, charging toward the golden dragon with an unstoppable force. Bang! With a great sound, Jian Shen collided with the golden dragon. A terrifying ripple of energy erupted in the form of a golden storm into the surroundings, dyeing the entire place a golden, dazzling light. The space at the center of the golden world violently trembled. It had turned into a blurry mess there. Even though the artifact space was much tougher than the outside world, it still ended up ripping open from their attacks. The golden energy slowly receded after a long while. Jian Shen stood upright where the golden dragon was before. His clothes had become rather messy and even slightly tattered, but his complexion remained the same, just as composed as before. The soul beneath him had already disappeared, now replaced by a 100-meter-wide ditch. He levitated in the air. Meanwhile, Nubis' golden dragon had vanished. 1,000 meters away in the air, Nubis blinked a few times and looked at Jian Chen in disbelief. He cried out, "How could that happen? My Saint Tier battle skill was already at the level of 7th Heavenly Layer Saint Kings, and even a Saint King at that level would need to exert quite the effort to defend against it. How did break through it so easily? Jian Chen, what's your strength right now? Have you reached the 8th Heavenly Layer already?" Jian Chen put the Emperor armament away. He did not care about his clothes at all. He took a step and arriving by Nubis' side instantly, he chuckled, "My strength is the same as yours, at the 3rd Heavenly Layer, but if I borrow the Emperor armament and use all I have, I should be able to display strength at the peak of the 7th Heavenly Layer. I understand the Saint Tier battle skill I've modified extremely well. It needs a sliver of my essence to cast it, so its strength is incomparable to ordinary Saint Tier battle skills. Even if your battle prowess is at the peak of the 7th Heavenly Layer, it's impossible for you to block my Saint Tier battle skill so easily." Nubis pursued the matter. He still refused to believe that Jian Chen's strength was at what he had said. Jian Chen thought about it and added, "Maybe it's because of my chaotic force." Nubis gave a deep nod with that. He said, "The energy you use is weird. Looks like that's really the cause. Alright, let's not talk about this for now. Let's go out first. I just happen to have some problems I need your help with," said Jian Chen. Nubis' eyes lit up with that. "I never thought that I'd have to fight right after I get out. Let's hurry. I just happen to be in need of someone to try my Saint Tier battle skill on." Jian Chen shook his head speechlessly. Nubis sure was a battle freak to have thought that his problem was a powerful enemy. However, he did not give an explanation. He just left the artifact space with Nubis. Nubis looked around after he got out. Other than a small island in the distance, there was just the boundless ocean. "Jian Chen, didn't you say you encountered some problems? Why don't I see any enemies?" Nubis asked in confusion. He constantly looked around in search of something. Jian Chen rolled his eyes at Nubis. "I think you've become confused after so many years of seclusion. My problem is something else, not a powerful enemy." "What's your problem then?" Nubis asked reflexively. He then looked toward the island far away and immediately understood something. "I get it, Jian Chen. Let me guess. Does your problem have to do with the Heavenly Enchantress?" Before Jian Chen could reply, Nubis continued as if that really was the case. "You don't need to reply anymore. I already know that that's the case. To think that I was so afraid of that woman when I was still a saint ruler. That's the greatest embarrassment in my entire life. But who made her specialize in soul attacks? And who made magical beasts have a weak soul? Too bad that my strength has skyrocketed. My soul had been refined as well when I modified the Saint Tier battle skill. Both my strength and the power of my soul are no longer comparable to before, so I have no need to fear even if I have to face up against the Heavenly Enchantress who's skilled in soul attacks." Nubis could not help but feel bold when he spoke to that point. He said, "Let's go, Jian Chen. Let's go to 3 Saint Island. Allow me, the great Nubis, to witness the soul attacks of the Heavenly Enchantress and regain the honor that I had lost back then." Nubis was about to fly toward 3 Saint Island when he said that. Jian Chen's heart jumped. He knew extremely well that it would be no different than seeking death if Nubis went to the island right now. He was not the Heavenly Enchantress opponent back then and was even less of an opponent now. Jian Chen grabbed Nubis' arm hurriedly and forcefully stopped him. He sternly said, "Nubis, don't blame me for not warning you. The Heavenly Enchantress' strength right now is incomparable to the past. I think she's already reached the 9th Heavenly Layer of Saint King, and her zither attacks are even more terrifying." Jian Chen could not help but think back to when the Heavenly Enchantress had knocked out countless experts of the Protector Changyang clan with a single note. He was also certain that the Heavenly Enchantress had only played the zither casually. If she had used all she had, even Saint Kings would not have been able to resist the terrifying charm hidden within the notes. What? She's already reached the 9th Heavenly Layer. Nubis jumped in fright. He stared at Jian Chen in disbelief. A few days ago, she played a note casually and it led to the collapse of a powerful Protector clan. Are you still certain you want to do that? Jian Chen said. Nubis could not help but retract his head in fright as he looked at the island in fear. He was no longer bold enough to proceed with what he was going to do. Magical beasts possessed an innate advantage of a powerful body, such that their battle prowess exceeded humans at the same level. However, they were not without weaknesses either, and one of these weaknesses was the soul. As a result, Nubis was more willing to fight against powerful humans than those who could use soul attacks. Nubis, I may have the battle prowess of a Saint King, but my comprehension of the mysteries of the world remains at the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler, so I can't rip open a space gate. I want to return to the Jesson Kingdom immediately, so just make a space gate for me. Only now did Nubis understand. Jian Chen's problem was not something he had thought of. Instead, it was the fact that he did not have the ability to construct a space gate to return home. Nubis was no longer willing to stay a moment later after learning how terrifying the heavenly enchantress was. He immediately created a space gate as quickly as he could, leaving with Jian Chen. Jian Chen and Nubis returned to the Jesson Kingdom together before summoning the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword Sect. They directly proceeded to the Bloodsword Sect under the lead of the 4 protectors. Rui Jin, Heiyu, and Hong Lian stayed in the clan. They did not go with him, but they had already left a method of communication with Jian Chen. As soon as Jian Chen encountered an opponent he could not defeat, the 3 of them would hurry over as soon as they could. Yu did not go along either. Instead, she stayed in the Bright Moon Divine Hall to cultivate, working hard on increasing her own strength. She knew that she could only help Jian Chen with even more things once she was strong. Hey you. Yeah you. Another survey. Chapter 12-13, Return of the Bloodsword Sect. Jian Chen was only accompanied by the 3rd heavenly layer Saint King Nubis on his journey to the Bloodsword Sect this time. Originally, they could have opened a space gate and arrived at the Bloodsword Sect through it, but unfortunately, neither Jian Chen nor Nubis knew the exact location of the sect, nor did they ever visit the place, so they did not know the exact location. As a result, they could only use the description from the 4 protectors to create a space gate several 100,000 kilometers away and fly the rest of the journey. Jian Chen and Nubis flew for an entire day and night under the lead of the 4 protectors before finally arriving where the Bloodsword Sect was located. To their surprise, the Bloodsword Sect was hidden in a small and extremely obscure valley within a huge, desolate mountain range. From the looks of it, the valley seemed rather similar to Longevity Valley where Uncle Shao stayed. A village was present in the valley as well, except it was even more obscure than Longevity Valley. It was large as well, possessing over 2,000 wooden huts in a neat fashion. All of the huts were ordered in a pattern, but they varied in sizes. The huts at the edge were the smallest, and the closer to the center, the larger they became. A hall constructed from 10,000-year-old ironwood stood at the center. It contained 7 floors and took up several tens of thousand square meters. A dead silence loomed over the entire village when Jian Chen and Nubis saw it. There was not a single person there, nor was there any farmland in the surroundings. It could have been easily misunderstood as a ghost town. However, that was not what Jian Chen and Nubis believed. They had already sensed several powerful presences in the silent village, and the most powerful one had already reached Saint Emperor. Is this where the Bloodsword Sect is located? Jian Chen asked as he looked at the village. Sect Master, this is indeed where we are located. The disciples of the sect basically all stay in the huts to cultivate, and they don't usually come out unless there's something happening. It's very common for not a single person to emerge in half a month, explained a protector. I, the great Nubis, can tell that there are only 2,000 people in total with just a single glance. The Bloodsword Sect is one of the 3 great assassination organizations on the continent after all. They may have declined, but isn't there just too few people? Nubis curled his lips scornfully. His impression of the Bloodsword Sect immediately plummeted. Our sect has not declined. We've only gone into seclusion under the sect master's orders and never appear on the Tian Yuan continent. We may have suffered heavy casualties from the battle 1,000 years ago, but we've recovered already after 1,000 years of recuperation. All the people here are the core disciples of our sect. All of them are elites. We have several tens of thousand other disciples outside, scattered and hidden across the entire continent, a protector explained emotionlessly. At this moment, a few people in red clothes flew over from the village, arriving before Jian Chen in just a few seconds. There were a total of 6 people. The leading person was an ordinary old man who seemed to be in his 70s. His vast presence allowed Jian Chen and Nubis to tell that he was a Saint King with a single glance and that he was the same as Nubis, at the 3rd heavenly layer. 2 people behind him were middle-aged men, while the other 3 were all old people. They were all at the 7th heavenly layer Saint Rulers at a minimum, and 2 of them were at the 9th heavenly layer. The Vice Sect Master Jiang Wang and the 5 elders have come to greet the Sect Master. The old man at the very front gave a clear greeting and bowed toward Jian Chen. He had learned that Jian Chen had become the Sect Master long ago and was extremely familiar with Jian Chen. Jian Chen could tell that the Vice Sect Master and the 5 elders were completely content with him taking up the position as Sect Master from their expressions. Jian Chen stepped up to help Jiang Wang rise and said, "There's no need to be so polite. I was fortunate enough to be favored by Uncle Xiu, which was why he passed the position as Sect Master to me, allowing me to take up the important matter of developing the Bloodsword sect. If there's anything that I do incorrectly in the future, please show me how it's done, Vice Sect Master." The Sect Master is too modest. Within the Sect Master possesses supreme authority. How could I correct you? Jian Chen and Jiang Wang conversed politely out of courtesy before being invited into the village by Jiang Wang. The 5 elders and 4 protectors followed silently behind them. Sect Master, all the people here are the core disciples of the sect. There are around 2,300 total, and the weakest are Earth Saint Masters. There are around 220 Heaven Saint Masters and 9 Saint Rulers in total, which would be the 4 protectors and the 5 elders. As for the Saint Kings, there is only me. Where we stay contains a powerful killing formation as well, formed from over 2,000 wooden huts. The control center for the formation would be the Blood God Hall in the very center, which is also the residence of the Sect Master. Other than the Vice Sect Master, everyone else can only enter the place after receiving the approval of the Sect Master. Along the way, Jiang Wang constantly explained the situation of the Bloodsword sect to Jian Chen. He began from where they stayed before moving on to the outer disciples that were scattered outside, allowing Jian Chen to gain a clear understanding of the structure of the sect in the end. The structure was not complicated at all. In fact, it was extremely simple. The entire organization was controlled by the 5 elders. They all managed their own squadron of people. The Vice Sect Master on the other hand possessed complete authority over the 5 elders, while the Sect Master was an absolute existence in the sect. They could decide everything and anything for the sect. The next day, Jian Chen underwent the formal ceremony of taking up the position as Sect Master. The ceremony was very simple. It was hosted by the Vice Sect Master, elders, and protectors, allowing all the core members to pay respects to the Sect Master. The first thing that Jian Chen did was hold a meeting after the ceremony. Currently, Jian Chen, Nubis, Jiang Wang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors gathered in a room enveloped by a barrier in the Blood God Hall. They all were stern. Jian Chen had changed into the special attire of the Sect Master. He wore blood-red, luxurious robes, which added a sense of maliciousness to his appearance. Today, I have 2 important matters to announce in this meeting. The first thing is that the Bloodsword sect will return to the continent again, Jian Chen sternly informed them. He rarely issued orders, but his words were filled with absolute authority. Jiang Wang, the elders, and the protectors all lit up in joy, but no one said anything in response. Jian Chen continued, "The next matter will be wiping out the Underworld sect." If the first matter had delighted the upper echelon of the Bloodsword sect, the second made them all ecstatic. In all these years, the 3 great assassination organizations had always been in conflict with one another. Countless smaller clashes had occurred in the past and their enmity had already reached an irreconcilable stage, especially when the Bloodsword sect waged a war that was unheard of against the Underworld sect and the Yamahal. Back then, Houston's strength was absolute, and neither one of the 2 organizations were the opponent of the Bloodsword sect. In the end, the 2 organizations worked together, allowing them to face the Bloodsword sect in a life-or-death battle. The battle was extremely intense. Although the two organizations worked together, Houston's strength was still supreme and the Bloodsword sect was unstoppable. Under his lead, the Bloodsword sect still managed to suppress the two other organizations, pushing them toward the brink of destruction. In the end, the battle only stopped after Houston's wife was assassinated, and from then on, the Bloodsword sect vanished from the Tianyuan continent. During the 1,000 years, the entire sect had wanted to take revenge against the two assassination organizations several times, but they could do nothing due to the sect master's orders, much less appear on the continent, which was why they withheld their enmity for a whole millennia. Now that the new sect master had finally released them from that order, they were all ravished with joy. "Sect master, when will we be moving out?" An elder stood up and excitedly asked. "Since the order has been issued, the sooner we move, the better. I hope we can finish off Uncle Xiu's revenge as soon as possible." "Do you know where the Underworld sect is located?" Jian Chen asked. "Sect master, the Underworld sect is well hidden, but it is not hidden well enough to hide from the intelligence hall of the Bloodsword sect. We've looked into this before. All we need is an order from the sect master and then we can set off immediately," replied Jiang Wang. He had yearned for this day for a very long time already. "If that's the case, let's set out tomorrow morning. Go make preparations today. We will be in an intense battle tomorrow," Jian Chen heavily informed them. "Sect master, how many people will we be bringing?" an elder asked. "Vice sect master, elders, and protectors, you will be coming with me. There is no need to bring the people below Saint Ruler. But sect master, the Underworld sect has a divine hall. They've always been hiding in it in the recent years, so we might not be able to break through the divine hall with our sect strength," said an elder. "You don't need to worry about this. Divine halls are tough, but they are not indestructible." Jian Chen's voice was filled with confidence, but he sighed inside. By the looks of things, he needed to trouble Roy Jean and the others when he moved against the Underworld sect. "Hey you. Yeah you. Another survey." Chapter 12-14, The President's size as one of the 7 capital cities on the continent, the City of God was bustling. Most of the people who strolled through the streets were rich merchants and the descendants of exceptional clans. Only once in a while would a few rough-looking mercenaries appear in the crowd. Not only was the City of God the territory of one of the 3 great clans that controlled the entire empire, the Tsar family, it was also the sanctuary of Radiant Saint Masters. Not only did most of the Radiant Saint Masters on the continent gather here, it was where all Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters lived. There were over 20 known Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters on the continent, and all of them had been bestowed a position as an elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union. A majestic castle stood quietly in the center of the city like a sleeping beast. It possessed a feeling like it had stood through many changes. The castle was snow-white, but it was aged, so it was not particularly bright in color. Traces of time were present on it. This castle was the headquarters of the Radiant Saint Master Union. On the 7th floor, the president, Adami, currently sat quietly on a throne in a beautifully adorned hall. His face was no longer as bright as before, now possessing traces of haggardness. Even his wrinkles had deepened, making him seem even older. "Esteemed President, Yilan wishes to see you." At this moment, a polite voice came from outside. "Sir, please come in," Adami gently replied. With a gentle wave of his right hand, a ball of milky white light flashed from it and the door opened silently. A man in tight-fitting robes walked in from outside. He only seemed to be in his early 30s since his dark eyes shone with vigor, like 2 pieces of obsidian. His handsome face possessed the weathering of wind and rain. "Esteemed President, I've led a group of people outside under your orders to find Master Yuntian, but there hasn't been any news of him even now." The young man clasped his hands at the president. Adami frowned and thought, Yuntian's already vanished for so many years. I really do wonder where he's gone. I've used a secret technique many times, but I still haven't been able to communicate with him. Has Yuntian suffered an accident? The president darkened when he thought of that possibility. Yuntian was his senior disciple. He had basically watched him grow up, so although they were just master and disciple, Adami had treated him as his own son. As a result, Adami felt rather sorrowful when he thought about how Yuntian may have suffered an accident. Yilan, it's been tiring for you over the past few days. Go rest first. You don't need to search for Yuntian anymore. Adami waved his hand gently. He was rather dispirited. President, you must look after yourself. I shall bid farewell, Yilan said in concern before backing out quietly. Sigh. With Yilan's departure, Adami sat back and leaned against the wide and comfortable throne. At this moment, Adami could not help but think about some matters of the past. In his life, he had taken on 3 disciples in total. The first one had departed long ago due to old age, while the second one was Yuntian, who he had watched grow up. As for his third disciple, it was something that he felt most prideful about. Both his first and second disciples were exceptional. They possessed an extremely great talent among Radiant Saint Masters, but compared to his third disciple, the difference was just unsurmountable, because not only was his third disciple a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, he was also a supreme expert that could shake up the continent. His achievements as a fighter had already surpassed his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master, already a famous Saint King who even the 10 Protector clans feared. Unfortunately, accidents occurred. The third disciple that Adami felt most pride for ended up taking away the Saint artifact of the Union, almost causing the Union to collapse. Not only did it result in an irreversible loss, it also cut Adami off from the possibility of becoming a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master. Adami was nearing the end of his life. He originally had a total of 3,000 years, and he gained another 200 years through a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource, so he had 3,200 years in total. Over 3,100 years had already passed, so he only had a few decades left. Adami had never married in his life, and he was without children. He only had a few wishes as he neared his death. One was to see the Union become even more powerful and even more glorious if he could not become a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master, while the other was being sent off by his closest disciples. However, his final wishes had all become dreams now. Let alone becoming even more powerful and even more glorious, it was extremely fortunate that the Union had not collapsed. Being sent off by his closest disciples was even more impossible. His second disciple had been missing for many years, and no one knew whether he was still alive or not right now, while his third disciple's status was far from what it had been in the past. Even as the president of the Union, he could not form proper ties with him, let alone be sent off by him. I've worked hard my entire life for the glory of the Union. I never thought that I would fail to see glory after over 2,000 years of work and that the Union would collapse in my hands. I am the offender of the Union, the president sighed at the sky. His voice trembled slightly and was filled with dreariness. Tears even pooled in his eyes. A tiny wooden hut stood all by itself on the peak of a mountain 10,000 kilometers from the city. Zar Kaiyun remained on the bed, eyes closed within the hut. She had been unconscious for many years already and had still not woken up. Kaiyun, do you still remember when we first met each other in the City of God? Back then, I was only an Earth Saint Master, and I had been chased into the city by a villain. I was very heavily injured and my space ring had been stolen as well. I had nothing. I was hungry and thirsty. With no other choice, I stole a set of clean clothes from a small household before dragging my exhausted body to an inn where I had a hearty meal. In the end, when I received the bill, I was completely ready to be beaten black and blue, but you suddenly appeared in that crucial moment. Back then, you were so pretty as a fairy from heaven. I was deeply drawn in at first glance. Back then, I still didn't know who you were. Not only did you help me pay off my bill, you even noticed that I was very heavily injured with a single glance. You gave me an invaluable Class 6 Radiant Spirit pill and spoke with me for a long time. From that time on, I had become your friend. I still remember when you found out that I had been hunted down by a villain. You fell into an utter rage, which we then went together to find him. We killed him by working together. Haowu held Zar Tsayun's hand as he gently recalled their first meeting. Reminiscence filled his eyes. In all the years Zar Kaiyun had been unconscious, he had stayed there, having not left for even a single moment. Kaiyun, do you still remember our promise back then? You said that once we're strong enough, we'll live a life as wanderers and travel across the continent. Kaiyun, wake up. Let's go fulfill that promise. On a lone island several million kilometers away from the Tianyuan continent in the vast sea, a disheveled man in tattered clothes currently crouched down as he wolfed down a fish in his hands. I'll eat you. I'll eat you. Yes, yes. I'll eat you, Yang Yutian. I'll be eating you, eating your flesh, and drinking your blood. Ha ha ha, isn't it very painful? Cry out, cry out. Keep crying out, keep struggling. No matter how you struggle before I, Master Yuntian, you will still become my prey in the end, the beggar-like person mumbled mindlessly as he gnawed the fish in his hands, laughing idiotically from time to time. With a plop, the water near the shore splashed and a 60-centimeter fish accidentally leaped ashore. It struggled furiously in an attempt to return to the water. The man's eyes immediately lit up. He tossed away the half-eaten fish and cried out at the same time, Yang Yutian, don't run away. As he said that, he lunged forward, pressing the fish that was just about to return to the water into the ground. The lower half of his face smashed into the rock underneath, causing him to bleed from his nose and mouth. However, he did not seem to be in pain. He spat out a mouthful of blood and 2 broken teeth as he laughed in a deranged fashion, I caught you, Yang Yutian. Let's see how you run now. In front of me, you can't escape no matter how great you are. I want to eat your flesh and drink your blood. He used his hands to grab the fish under him. The fish immediately began to struggle desperately, rapidly opening and closing its mouth. Yun Tian became even more excited when he saw this. He laughed aloud, Yang Yutian, never did you think that you would end up like this. Struggle desperately. Call out miserably. Go on, do it. Plead for your life. Plead me to spare your life. I might just spare your life. Yang Yutian, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you pleading? Talk, go on, talk. Okay, Yang Yutian. You're not going to talk. Since you're not going to talk, don't blame me. I'll bite you to death. As he said that, Yun Tian opened his bloodied mouth to viciously bite the fish. His 2 broken teeth could clearly be seen. Hey you. Yeah you. Another survey. Chapter 12-15, Wiping Out the Underworld Sect, 1. When the Beast God continent had launched a large-scale invasion of the Tianyuan continent because of the Winged Tiger God, they were obstructed by the experts of the Tianyuan continent before an agreement was reached. Thus, the experts all temporarily settled down on an island. Afterward, Yun Tian left the Union and the continent with news regarding the Winged Tiger God, wanting to find the experts to tell them that the Winged Tiger God was with Jian Shen and, hence, cause problems for him. However, Yun Tian fainted from exhaustion after flying for a few days. Just as he was about to drown, a magical beast happened to pass by. The magical beast scooped him from the water and brought him to the island. After learning about the Winged Tiger God from Yun Tian, the experts of the Beast God continent set off for the Tianyuan continent again while Yun Tian was left on the island. Yun Tian was unable to make the journey because the island was extremely far away from the continent. He had no idea in which direction to travel, and he was not strong enough for the journey, so he ended up trapped there. At the very beginning, Yun Tian was still able to keep his sanity, but after quite some time, he could no longer bear it and was eventually reduced to his current shape. Jian Shen led the vice sect master, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors the morning of the next day. They headed to where the Underworld sect was located. Nubis obviously followed along as well. Jiang Wang had searched for the exact hiding location of the Underworld sect himself, so he had left down marks from back then. They arrived where the Underworld sect was located through a space gate created by the vice sect master. It was located in a yellow world, sand as far as the eye could see. The burning sun hung high in the air and radiated with an intense heat, baking the earth until it was scorching hot. Jian Shen, Nubis, Jiang Wang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors all levitated in the sky at ease. They gazed at the ground from above. The severe conditions of the desert did not affect them at all. Sect Master, in order to prevent the experts of the Underworld sect from sensing us, I've chosen to construct the space gate 1,000 kilometers away. There's a region of loose sand up ahead. The divine hall of the Underworld sect is hidden beneath the loose sand, Jiang Wang explained to Jianchen. Jianchen immediately looked ahead and nodded slightly. He said, "Let's go." With that, the group set off. The weakest among them were the 4 protectors, who were saint rulers at the 5th heavenly layer, so all of them possessed a rather deep comprehension of space. As a result, they moved extremely quickly, crossing 1,000 kilometers in less than 5 minutes. Jianchen immediately extended his presence into the ground when he arrived above the region of loose sand. Indeed, he discovered a huge divine hall standing silently underneath the sand. Jianchen's eyes grew cold. Of the 2 organizations that had murdered Uncle Xiu's wife all those years ago, the Yama Hall had already been devastated by him. All that was left was the Underworld sect. Jianchen did not hesitate. A powerful killing intent surged out of him into the surroundings while the Emperor armament silently appeared in his hand. A dark mist coiled around the weapon, giving off the violent presence of destruction. Jiang Wang and the 5 elders shivered inside. Jianchen's killing intent was enough to make them tremble in fear, allowing them to finally witness Jianchen's strength. All of them sighed, the rumors were true. Although they had heard about Jianchen's strength, they learned about it from the rumors of the Tianyuan continent. None of them had any idea just how many of the rumors were fake. Jianchen swung his sword and a black sword chi an arm thick shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. It disappeared into the loose sand below in a single instant. The sword chi possessed the might of a 7 heavenly layer Saint King, so it shot toward the divine hall 100 meters below. Although it was nowhere near enough to break through the divine hall, it was enough to shake it. The divine hall shook violently, alarming all the people within it. The next moment, a black figure shot out of it with lightning-like speed, emerging with a powerful presence. It faced against Jianchen's group. It was a person completely shrouded by black robes. The figure's appearance was completely obscured, making it impossible to distinguish whether the figure was a man or a woman. The figure bore the presence of a 5th heavenly layer Saint King. "Who are you? Why are you provoking my Underworld sect?" The shrouded person questioned in a heavy, hoarse voice, again, making it impossible to distinguish their gender. "Ha ha ha, Luo Qi, isn't your memory a little too horrible? It's only been 1,000 years, yet you've forgotten your old friends," sneered Jiang Wang. "It's you, Jiang Wang. You're all people from the Bloodsword sect." The shrouded person's voice was filled with shock. It continued, "Hasn't the Bloodsword sect stepped back from the continent and no longer bothers with any matters that have to do with the continent? I wonder why you've come with such a great party then. Luo Qi, this is the new sect master of our Bloodsword sect. By the orders of the sect master, we have returned, and you, the Underworld sect, will be an offering for our return," laughed Jiang Wang. "Humph, you still don't have the right to wipe out my Underworld sect," sneered the shrouded figure. Its voice was filled with disdain. "It's still not up to you to decide whether we have the right or not," Jianchen coldly replied. He took a step and arrived by the side of the shrouded figure, stabbing his emperor armament at the person's head. The shrouded figure was secretly shocked when it sensed the strength of Jianchen's attack. However, it did not move slowly at all. Vast amounts of darkness attributed Saint force surged from a palm, immediately condensing into a small, black dagger. Without retreating at all, they dodged Jianchen's sword while the dagger lashed out like a calm viper, soundlessly stabbing toward the center of Jianchen's forehead as a black streak of light. The corner of Jianchen's lips curled up in disdain. Rotating his wrist, he redirected the sword toward the figure's head. If Jianchen's first strike possessed speed that was nothing spectacular, the second attack was unbelievably fast. A pitch-black crack formed wherever the sword swept past. The shrouded figure was surprised inside. Jianchen's attack was just too fast, so fast that as a 5th heavenly layer Saint King, the figure had almost failed to react. It was already too late to dodge, so without any other choices, the figure could only redirect the dagger to parry the Emperor armament. A boom immediately erupted when the two weapons clashed. A powerful ripple of energy spread out with the two of them as the epicenter, wreaking havoc in all directions as a wave. Jian Chen's strike possessed the strength of a 7th heavenly layer Saint King, so how could the shrouded figure block it? The figure was immediately sent into a rapid retreat. The strength of the new sect master is so powerful, actually at the 7th heavenly layer. There's no one in the sect that his opponent other than the former sect master, who's in seclusion. The shrouded person was secretly astounded. It immediately abandoned the battle, quickly charging underground. As long as the figure made it back to the Divine Hall, it would be invincible. However, a bone-chilling event hit the person just as they moved. Jian Shen arrived by their side like a ghost while the black light on the Emperor armament surged, stabbing out again with lightning-like speed. The tip of the sword was less than 3 inches away from the person's forehead. They could even feel a stabbing pain from the figure's soul at such a close range, as if his or her soul was about to be ripped into pieces. The shrouded figure paled in fright. Other than Houston 1,000 years ago, this was the first time it had ever felt so close to death. At this crucial moment, the person spat out a mouthful of thick, black mist and yelled, "Darkness art, afterimage clone." Jian Chen's Emperor armament stabbed into the person's head as soon as the figure yelled. However, Jian Chen did not rejoice and instead frowned. His sword failed to land. Bang! As soon as that thought crossed Jian Chen's mind, the black figure exploded loudly. It turned into dense black mist, quickly expanding and engulfing Jian Chen. The mist was no ordinary mist, but formed from darkness-attributed saint force. Even Jian Chen's visibility was severely limited within the mist. Suddenly, a small, black dagger appeared silently behind him. The dagger had completely fused with the mist, so it was extremely difficult to sense no matter how sharp Jian Chen's senses were. However, Jian Chen suddenly turned around just as the dagger was about to stab him. He swung his Emperor armament without any hesitation and the chaotic force on the weapon cleaved through the space. The stroke was extremely powerful, enough to affect the space in the region of 100 meters, causing it to violently pulse. Arg! With a painful cry, a bloodied hand fell out of the sky with the dagger before it could deal a fatal strike to Jian Chen. Not only did the shrouded person fail to assassinate Jian Chen in the mist, that figure even lost an arm. The mist slowly dispersed and Jian Chen gradually appeared before everyone. However, the shrouded figure had already disappeared. The vice sect master and the 5 elders could not help but feel relieved when they saw Jian Chen perfectly fine. Although they knew that he was very powerful, the opponent this time was an expert of the Underworld sect who was skilled in assassination techniques. There was the threat of dying with the slightest carelessness. "Sect master, are you alright? Where's Luo Qi?" Jiang Wang arrived beside Jian Chen and asked about his well-being. Jian Chen was calm and composed. He gently shook his head. "He's still not enough to pose a threat to me, but he sure ran pretty quickly." After severing his arm, he immediately fled into the sand and into the Divine Hall. Jian Chen put it lightly, but Jiang Wang and the 5 elders were all secretly stunned. A 5th heavenly layer Saint King of the Underworld sect, skilled in assassination, was actually not enough to pose a threat to him, which convinced them of his strength again. At this moment, Jiang Wang and the 5 elders all agreed inside that Jian Chen was even more powerful than the rumors. "Hey you! Yeah you! Another survey." Chapter 12-16, Wiping Out the Underworld Sect, 2. Suddenly, the sand underneath began to violently churn. A divine hall shot out, slowly emerging with a vast presence. "That's the Darkness Divine Hall of the Underworld Sect," Jiang Wang immediately cried as he watched the giant divine hall slowly emerge from the sand. He became stern. Although he knew that Jian Chen had a method to break through it, its tough defenses still pressured him on a psychological level. This was because if they could not smash through it, they would not be able to touch the assassins hiding inside, and a Saint Emperor's power was required to smash through it. Every single divine hall on the Tian Yuan continent was created by Saint Emperors, so they possessed the power of Saint Emperors. Although this power could not be used to harm those outside the Divine Hall, it was the structure's strongest defense. It was not something that Saint Kings could break through even if they were at great perfection. My Underworld sect has existed for over 100,000 years on the Tianyuan continent, so how can we be wiped out by you, the mere Bloodsword sect? Even with Houston's supreme strength 1,000 years ago, you still didn't have the power to wipe us out, so I'd like to see just how you will finish us off today. Luo Qi's furious voice rang from the Divine Hall. Under Luo Qi's control, the Divine Hall rapidly expanded before arriving above Jian Chen and the others. It shot down with its great presence. Jian Chen coldly smiled. A piece of jade had silently appeared in his hand, and by tightening his grip slightly, the jade piece was crushed into pieces. Sect Master, let's retreat, Jiang Wang suggested from beside Jian Chen before quickly retreating with the 5 elders and 4 protectors in attempt to escape the area covered by the Divine Hall. Although the structure did not possess any offensive capabilities, none of them wanted to be pressed into the sand. However, just when they had retreated by a few dozen meters and had yet to make it out, spatial force suddenly appeared near Jian Chen. 10 meters away from him, the space violently rippled and it ripped open, forming a multicolored space gate. A vast pressure flooded out of the space gate the moment it formed, filling up the surroundings. The air around seemed to have stopped moving because of the vast pressure and became thick. The group of experts from the Bloodsword sect all froze as well. Other than Jiang Wang, who was at the 3rd heavenly layer of Saint King, the elders and protectors felt like they were suffocating before the pressure. They felt like they had lost the ability to breathe. Jiang Wang and the elders were shocked while the 4 protectors maintained their composure. The pressure had greatly exceeded their former sect master's aura, making them believe that they were facing a Saint Emperor. The structure continued to rapidly descend as it grew closer from above, blotting out the sun like a dark cloud. As that happened, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu emerged side by side from the space gate. They noticed the Divine Hall in the sky as soon as they arrived, and a sliver of scorn immediately appeared in their eyes. Rui Jin slowly raised his hand and held up the Divine Hall with his right hand. With a creak, Rui Jin's hand actually forced the Divine Hall to suddenly halt from its descent, as if the huge Divine Hall was being held up by Rui Jin with a single hand. The eyes of Jiang Wang, the elders, and the protectors all narrowed at this sight. Stopping a Divine Hall with a single hand was not something a Saint King at great perfection could accomplish. The 6 of them had all become stunned by the supreme strength Rui Jin had displayed. Although they had heard rumors that Jian Chen possessed 3 experts who were no weaker than Saint Emperors by his side, they were still rumors after all. They thought the rumors had all been exaggerated, but what they were witnessing today validated the rumors. One of them could stop the descent of a Divine Hall with a single hand and appear as though they were at ease. With their understanding, only Saint Emperors could do something like that. Other than the 4 protectors who had already seen the trio's strength, all the other people's opinions of Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu underwent a drastic change. They all looked at them with unhideable respect. At this moment, Rui Jin's hands suddenly jerked and a thunderous creak immediately appeared. The Divine Hall was actually thrown high up into the air with just a jerk of his hand. Saint Emperors? You're Saint Emperors? Impossible, this is impossible. Other than the Path Lord of the Carnal Desires, there is no second Saint Emperor on the Tianyuan continent. Luo Qi's terrifying voice rang out of the Divine Hall, but something seemed to cross his mind very soon. Luo Qi cried out uncontrollably, I know. You're the 3 magical beast experts that follow the captain of the Flame Mercenaries. No one paid any attention to Luo Qi even though he was a 5th heavenly layer Saint King. At the same time, a dazzling streak of golden light suddenly appeared. Rui Jin had already drawn the sacred dragon's sword. Holding it above his head, his presence rapidly skyrocketed. He then chopped at the structure. With that attack, 100-meter golden sword Qi directly appeared. It possessed origin energy, an energy that could only be controlled by sovereign-like existences that had surpassed Saint Emperor and stepped into the origin realm. Even Saint Emperors needed to avoid it. The huge sword Qi landed on the Divine Hall, and it immediately rumbled loudly. The entire structure violently shook before splitting in half while Jian Chen and the others were filled with disbelief. The divine hall had actually been chopped in half with a single stroke from Rui Jin. Impossible. This is impossible, Luo Qi cried out in disbelief. The divine hall had been what the Underworld sect relied on the most. It was also their greatest trump card in regards to protecting themselves, but someone had actually split the structure in half, such that their terrifying might utterly frighten Luo Qi. Hong Lian and He Yu stared at the falling ruined divine hall in secret shock. Although the two of them could smash through the divine hall with their origin energy weapons, they could not have done it as easily as Rui Jin, who had split the whole thing in half with a single attack. Rui Jin, you must be close to breaking through. Hong Lian suddenly turned her head to Rui Jin. A red light danced in her eyes like flames. Rui Jin put away the weapon and indifferently replied, I've already touched that barrier. I believe I can become a Saint Emperor within 50 years. Jian Shen was surprised by that. His face immediately became filled with joy. He emotionally asked, Senior Rui Jin, you're about to become a Saint Emperor? Rui Jin smiled at how excited Jian Shen had become. He said, the reason why the current world lacks Saint Emperors is all because of the lack of origin energy. My Sacred Dragon's sword and Sacred Dragon's armor possess it, so breaking through obviously won't be a problem. It's the same for Hong Lian and He Yu. It's just a matter of time. Jian Shen sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down, but he found it difficult to suppress the joy inside. It was as if he had already witnessed the moment when all three of them became Saint Emperors, a moment that would happen in a few decades. Boom! Boom! At this moment, two rumbles rang out nearby. The divine hall no longer possessed the power to remain levitating after being split in half by Rui Jin, so it landed in the sand. Countless black-robed assassins quickly charged out from the ruined divine hall, fleeing into the distance as quickly as they could. None of them are allowed to escape. Kill! Jian Shen's eyes grew cold, and he immediately ordered the experts of the Bloodsword sect to attack before using the illusory flash to arrive atop the ruined structure. His emperor armament turned into a cascade of afterimages as he stabbed at the assassins that slipped out of the structure, killing over 10 people in the blink of an eye. Jiang Wang, the elders, and the protectors hunted down the assassins that fled in all directions. Although they were saint rulers or even saint kings who could not commit enormous massacres, they still hunted down the assassins in order to wipe out the Underworld sect. And even if celestial decay would occur after killing far too many people, that would only happen if hundreds of thousands or even more people were slaughtered. The Underworld sect was only a few thousand people and every single one of them had hands dyed with blood. They had even less need to worry about celestial decay with that. Now that the item that the Underworld sect relied on the most was gone, all the assassins were greatly affected at a psychological level. Every single one of them became dejected and lost the courage to battle. As soon as they made it out of the divine hall, they would immediately charge off into the distance. Jiang Wang, the elders, and the protectors used everything they had to kill the fleeing assassins. Since all those below Saint Ruler were ants, even the Heaven Saint Masters had no power to fight back against Saint Ruler abilities. With a single thought, a Saint Ruler could freeze a region of space and trap several assassins of the Underworld sect there before easily killing them off. At this moment, over 10 assassins from the Underworld sect, dressed in the same attire, charged out of the divine hall by concealing themselves in groups of people. As soon as they made it outside, they fused with the surrounding space, fleeing at an unbelievable pace as a blur. It's the Saint Rulers of the Underworld sect. Don't let any of them escape. Jiang Wang exclaimed. He gave up on the Heaven Saint Masters he had immobilized with his frozen space and chased after a 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler. The elders and protectors gave up on their small fry as well, all chasing after the fleeing Saint Rulers. Rui Jin suddenly formed a seal with his hands and called out, "Secret technique of the Dragon Clan, Dragon's Domain." With that, a halo of golden light rapidly expanded from Rui Jin, covering the surroundings with unbelievable speed. It covered over 1,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. The region within a radius of over 1,000 kilometers became slightly golden. This was Rui Jin's Dragon's Domain, which turned a certain region of the surrounding space into his own domain. Other than Hong Lian, Roy Jin, Jian Chen, Nubis, and the people of the Bloodsword Sect, all the people in the space felt like they had suddenly been trapped by an invisible force, making them move much slower. They felt like they were in treacle. Only the Saint Rulers could resist this slowing effect with their full strength. All those below Saint Ruler were completely immobilized. Hey you. Yeah you. Another survey. Chapter 12-17, Ancient Teleportation Formation. Roy Jin's dragon's domain had already engulfed a radius of 1,000 kilometers, but it had only been a few seconds since the Divine Hall of the Underworld Sect had been destroyed. In such a short amount of time, even Saint Rulers could not traverse 1,000 kilometers, so all the assassins were trapped in the domain as soon as it formed. No one managed to flee successfully. Jiang Wang and the 5 protectors had all caught up with the Saint Rulers now and began a great fight with everything they had. All the Saint Rulers of the Underworld Sect used darkness-attributed Saint Force, so they all used secret techniques to morph into dense, black mist as soon as the battle began. They engulfed a certain range, silently moving through the mist in search of an opportunity to deal a sneak attack on their enemies. The Saint Rulers of the Underworld Sect mainly used their darkness-attributed Saint Force to assassinate their targets, while the Bloodsword Sect used Baleful Force as their trump card. All the assassination organizations used unique techniques. However, none of them used Baleful Force in their fight against the Saint Rulers of the Underworld Sect. Baleful Force was refined through slaughter, so it was just too valuable to Saint Rulers. Even though that was the case, the experts of the Bloodsword Sect gained the upper hand since they were unaffected by the dragon's domain and, hence, at a complete advantage. On the other hand, the Saint Rulers of the Underworld Sect struggled to use 70 to 80% of their power under the restraint of the dragon's domain. Bang! Jiang Wang casually struck the head of a Saint Ruler with his hand, blowing the head up on the spot and wiping out the soul. At the same time, a 9th Heavenly Layer Elder killed his opponent as well. A blood-red spike passed through the forehead of his enemy before emerging from the other side. It completely passed through the person's head and dissipated his opponent's soul before he could flee. Jian Chen did not take part in the battle and instead stood with Nubis. He constantly looked around with sharp eyes. He planned on leaving all the Saint Rulers to Jiang Wang and the elders. He would not bother with personally dealing with those who were weaker. Odd, Jian Chen. Why don't I see that dude with the arm you took? Nubis stood beside Jian Chen with his arms crossed as he constantly looked around, searching. Jian Chen frowned slightly. He too had been waiting for Luo Qi this entire time, but he still had not seen Luo Qi flee from the Divine Hall. Although the Divine Hall was now ruined, the power inside had yet to dissipate completely, so his presence could not enter the structure. Perhaps Luo Qi is still hiding within the Divine Hall? Jian Chen mumbled to himself. Although all the assassins that fled from the Divine Hall wore the exact same thing, none of them could escape his presence. He did not find Luo Qi at all. I'll enter the Divine Hall and have a look, said Jian Chen before entering the ruins. Nubis followed him in as well. The Divine Hall was pitch black inside. The darkness-attributed Saint Force was extremely dense. For those who used darkness-attributed Saint Force, cultivating inside would have been extremely effective, but the structure was now destroyed, so the Saint Force was slowly dissipating. The power of the Divine Hall dispersed rapidly as well. Jian Chen stood with Nubis in the dark structure. He frowned slightly because their visibility was limited to 5 meters due to the darkness. Do you think darkness-attributed Saint Force is enough to stop me, the great Nubis? Nubis sneered. He then immediately began to shine with a dazzling, golden glow. He was like a miniature sun in the Divine Hall where the Saint Force dispersed as soon as it came in contact with the light. In the blink of an eye, the Divine Hall cleared up. They were inside a well-adorned hall. It was empty, only possessing a few valuable decorations. Jian Chen ignored the decor and looked around. He said, Luo Qi must be hiding in this Divine Hall. Let's look around first. We can't let him escape, or it'll cause endless future problems. We have the 3 seniors watching guard outside, so we don't need to worry about Luo Qi fleeing from another exit while we're in here. Jian Shen and Nubis began to look through the Divine Hall. There was still some residual power of the Divine Hall in the surrounding walls, obstructing Jian Shen's presence. As a result, they could only search slowly. Along the way, Jian Shen came across quite a few tunnels that had been hidden by walls as well as formations that were concealed everywhere. However, they were all smashed through by the two of them. The toughness of the Divine Hall and the formations inside were supported by the Divine Hall's power, so as it slowly dissipated, both the walls and formations weakened greatly. At this moment, in an extremely well-hidden room within the Divine Hall, a shrouded person, who was missing an arm, stood with a short old man. The old man was rather pale, but his eyes shone with vigor. Luo Qi, there's already been 2 people who've entered the Divine Hall. It probably won't take them long to arrive here. We need to leave as soon as possible, the old man said softly and indifferently. Former Sect Master, we're not going to bother with the other people of the sect? Luo Qi asked hoarsely. They can destroy the Darkness Divine Hall with a single strike, so they must be at the level of Saint Emperors. Against such opponents, I wouldn't even have the power to fight back even if I was at my peak. This baleful force sure is powerful. I was injured by Houston's baleful force 1,000 years ago. My soul still hasn't recovered after 1,000 years of resting, the old man coldly stated. He was still filled with much hatred. All the people of the Bloodsword sect are outside right now as well as the 3 terrifyingly powerful magical beasts. We'll definitely be discovered if we go out, so how should we leave? Luo Qi asked. I already understand the situation outside. An expert has already cast an absolute secret technique to engulf the surrounding radius of 1,000 kilometers. We definitely can't go outside, but we still have one thing we've been holding back, or we'll probably end up dead today, the short old man spoke in a heavy voice. Darkness attributed Saint Force surged from his feet into the ground. Gradually, an extremely complicated formation appeared beneath them. This is a space gate. Can we leave through a space gate in the Divine Hall? Isn't it impossible to rip open space in the Divine Hall? Luo Qi asked doubtfully. The short old man coldly smiled with that. This is no space gate, but an ancient teleportation formation. It was accidentally obtained by the sect several tens of thousand years ago, and it was cast here to prepare for the day when we suffer devastating attacks from enemies. It can allow us to avoid this disaster, and once it's used, the formation will shatter by itself. There's no need to worry about people following our tracks. Luo Qi rejoiced inside. He said, let me go get the Saint Tier battle skill first and then we can leave. There's not enough time. The 2 of them are already close, so we need to leave immediately. Otherwise, we won't be able to leave if they destroy the formation, replied the old man. The teleportation formation was activated very quickly. With a violent rippling of space, the 2 of them disappeared. Several hundred meters away, Jian Shen and Nubis continued to search, headed in the direction of the room. The Divine Hall's power was much thinner than before, so Jian Shen's presence could pass through a few obstructions with some difficulty. When Luo Qi and the old man left through the teleportation formation, Jian Shen's expression changed. He could suddenly feel an extremely minute rippling of space, so he quickly ran in the direction without a second thought. Boom! Jian Shen cut down the entrance with a single stroke after arriving outside the room. The rippling of space that filled the room became even more intense now that the door was gone, but there was not a single person in it, only a destroyed formation on the ground. Jian Shen sighed when he saw the formation. We've come too late. They've already left. I never thought they could leave through a space gate in the Divine Hall. Nubis' face became rather sunken. He knew exactly what it meant for a 5th heavenly layer Saint King to flee. Their future problems would be unending once they decided to take revenge, and it would become an extremely annoying situation, let alone the fact that the person who escaped was a Saint King assassin. Jian Shen, what do we do? Nubis' complexion became rather ugly. He had already become great friends with Jian Shen since what had happened in the past, so he obviously treated Jian Shen's business as his own. Jian Shen furrowed his brows in thought before relaxing soon after. His greatest worry was the Changyang clan and his friends in the Flame Mercenaries, but the Changyang clan was now protected by Changyang Zhu Yunshao, who was basically on par with a Saint King at great perfection, so the clan were basically impregnable. He planned on asking Roy Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu to look over the Flame Mercenaries. Yu could help as well, so he would no longer have to worry about Bai Lian and the others' safety once the Bright Moon Divine Hall was present. Afterward, Jian Chen and Nubis began to search the Divine Hall. They found a huge stone tablet lodged into a stone wall in a neighboring room. What surprised Jian Chen was that it was actually a complete Saint-tier battle skill. Jian Chen began to remove the stone tablet from the wall without any hesitation. Only after a tremendous amount of effort did he finally succeed in removing the tablet. It was only 5 meters long, but it was exceptionally heavy, countless times heavier than metal. Even with Jian Chen's current strength, he needed to use quite some power to lift it up. The Saint-tier battle skill recorded in the stone tablet was a fist technique, which was unsuitable for Jian Chen. Jian Chen walked a different path of cultivation from the people of the Tianyuan continent, so he could not practice Saint-tier battle skills. He threw the tablet into the artifact space, planning to get the elites in there to comprehend the Saint-tier battle skill after they became Saint rulers. Chapter 12:18, Proceeding to the Ice Goddess Hall. 1. Jian Chen and Nubis searched through the Darkness Divine Hall again after removing the Saint-tier battle skill, but it was a pity that they did not obtain anything else. Jian Chen was still very satisfied, however, since a complete Saint-tier battle skill was the greatest item he could have found. Jian Chen and Nubis left the Darkness Divine Hall and returned to the other people's side. They saw that the experts of the Bloodsword sect had already been waiting for quite some time, as they had already killed off the several thousand assassins of the Underworld sect. Sect Master, where's Luo Qi? And the Sect Master of the Underworld sect, Gu Zhen? I suspect that he's still alive and probably hiding somewhere in the Divine Hall, Jiang Wang asked courteously. He felt rather surprised when he did not see Luo Qi's corpse. They've fled. I never thought that they hit a space gate in the Divine Hall, Jian Chen said with some regret. Roy Jin furrowed his brow slightly with that. He said, in my dragon's domain, space gates can't form at all. How can they flee through a space gate? I'll go check out the place where they used that space gate. Roy Jin entered the ruined Divine Hall with that while Jian Chen and the others followed behind. In the room Luo Qi and the old man had fled from, Roy Jin, Hong Lian, He Yu, Jian Chen, and the others stood around, examining the formation on the floor. This isn't a space gate. Hong Lian fixedly stared at the formation on the ground and realized that there was something wrong very quickly. Fixed space gates were similar to the formation on the ground, but there was an extremely clear difference between the two. Correct. This isn't a space gate, but an ancient teleportation formation. I never thought that something like this would be here. No wonder they managed to flee my dragon's domain, said Roy Jin. An ancient teleportation formation? Jian Chen murmured. He was filled with curiosity, and even Jiang Wang and Nubis became doubtful. Roy Jin explained, I've only found information regarding the teleportation formation from my inherited memories. These formations only appeared in ancient times and were extremely valuable. Not only do they have similar uses as space gates, able to teleport a certain number of people or things, they're completely unaffected by the surrounding space, so they can be used even in heavily distorted or even shattered space. The teleportation distance is extremely far away as well and can break through all limitations of space. They are far more powerful than space gates. But according to my inherited memories, even in ancient times, these formations were extremely rare. No one knows their origins, and there was no one who could make them because the requirements for creating one were just far too great. You would need to reach an utmost mastery with formations and then possess an extremely great comprehension of space. No one could fulfill these two requirements in ancient times, especially in regard to the comprehension of space. Even the level of Saint Emperors was nowhere near enough. The teleportation formations from ancient times seemed to have appeared out of nowhere and were slowly used up. I never thought I'd actually see one today. I never thought that the Underworld sect would actually be in possession of such a valuable teleportation formation. Looks like they were not fated to die today. Jian Chen thought. After learning about the teleportation formation, he knew that it was impossible to stop them from getting away today. The former sect master of the Underworld sect, Gu Zhen, is still likely to be alive. Looks like he left with Luo Qi. I just wonder if Gu Zhen has fully healed from his wounds and whether he's made any improvements in his cultivation. 1,000 years ago, Gu Zhen was an 8th heavenly layer Saint King, so if he did, that would be troublesome, Jiang Wang worried. Vice Sect Master, don't worry. Uncle Xiao has handed the Blood Divine Hall to me. I'll give you control of the Divine Hall, so even if the Sect Master makes a full recovery, he won't be able to do anything to you with the Divine Hall, said Jian Chen. They did not stick around for long, leaving the desert very quickly. All the space rings from the assassins were handed to Jian Chen as well, but Jian Chen only glanced through them. He passed them all to Jiang Wang after seeing that there was nothing that he needed in them. Although there were quite a decent amount of wealth in all the space rings, money no longer held any true value to Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not return to the base of the Bloodsword sect. After handing over the Divine Hall he had obtained from Uncle Xiao, he went to the Changyang clan with Rui Jin and the others. Since they had already confirmed that at least 2 Saint Kings had managed to flee, the Bloodsword sect needed to make preparations to protect themselves. Currently, they only had Jiang Wang as their Saint King, and he was only of the 3rd heavenly layer. He was not an opponent of any of the Saint Kings that managed to flee, so handing the Divine Hall to Jiang Wang could protect them against Luo Qi and Gu Zhen's revenge. Pondering over the problem after returning to the Changyang clan, Jian Chen still ended up getting Yu Yu to watch over the flame mercenaries for a while. Although Yu Yu was still weak, he clearly felt much safer about it when he thought about Yu Yu's powerful master. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had already helped him enough in recent times, so Jian Chen could not shamelessly request them to watch over the flame mercenaries. Jian Chen had sent out all the scouts of the Bloodsword sect as well, searching for the experts who had fled everywhere on the continent. Although Jian Chen knew that it would probably amount to nothing, he would not give up on the slightest hope. Every single day that the Saint Kings were still alive would be another day he was unable to be at peace. In recent times, the most popular topic of discussions across the continent was the Bloodsword sect. The Bloodsword sect that had vanished for 1,000 years had actually reappeared. Not only did it draw a great deal of attention from various organizations, the sect even did something that shocked countless people. All the hidden bases of the Underworld sect scattered across the continent were found by the Bloodsword sect and washed with blood. An even more shocking piece of news swept through the continent closely after that. The Underworld sect that had existed for over 100,000 years on the continent had actually been wiped out by the Bloodsword sect, stunning countless people. The disturbance created by the news was so great that even Mercenary City and the 3 great empires were affected. After all, the Bloodsword sect was an organization equivalent to an ancient clan. Coupled with Houston, who was at the great perfection of Saint King, they would be an absolute existence even among ancient clans. It was impossible for such a great organization to not cause a disturbance after it suddenly returned. Jian Chen did not pay attention to the commotion on the continent while he stayed in the Changyang clan. He was currently with his second aunt, Yu Fengyan, in a pavilion within the garden. Yu Fengyan's eyes were red and swollen, streaks of tears covered her face. She constantly used her silk handkerchief to wipe away more tears. She had missed her daughter for many years now. Other than returning once when Jian Chen had been forced off the continent, she had not received any news of Changyang Mingyue since, which made Yu Fengyan worry since she only had one daughter. She basically spent all her time thinking about her daughter, and she had become much more haggard after all these years of longing. Yu Fengyan's yearning for her daughter reached an unprecedented peak with Changyang Hu's return. She finally came and found Jian Chen after no longer able to hold it in. Xiangtian, I know you're a famed expert of the continent now, but I miss Mingyue far too much. Can you take me to see Mingyue? I'm begging you. I just want to catch a single glance of her and then I'll be happy, sobbed Yu Fengyan. She was extremely sad. Chapter 12-19, proceeding to the Ice Goddess Hall. 2. Jianchen felt rather pained when he saw just how distressed Yu Fengyan was. His second aunt held an extremely important position in his heart, even greater than his own father. This was because when he was young, Yu Fengyan cared for him the second most behind his own mother. Even his father's care was nowhere near how much Yu Fengyan cared for him, especially after he had undergone the Saint's test. Once he had been tested to be unable to use Saint force and was labeled as a cripple, Changyang visited him even less. Back then, only Bai Yuntian, Yu Fengjiang, and Changyang Mingyue out of the entire clan cared for him. Jianchen could feel exactly how Yu Fengyan felt when he watched her in so much heart-aching pain. He could also sense her feeling of helplessness. Ignoring the fact that the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall was not on the Tianyuan continent and was extremely far away, just the icy climate there was enough to prevent Heaven Saint Masters from getting anywhere close. Even fire-attributed Heaven Saint Masters could be frozen into an ice cube, so only Saint rulers could survive there. Although the clan now had around a dozen Saint rulers and several Saint kings, every single one of them possessed great statuses. Even the patriarch of the clan, Changyang, needed to greet them politely when he saw them, let alone Yu Fengyan, who was only one of Changyang's many wives. On the surface, Yu Fengyan was the second madam of the clan and possessed great status, but she was nothing in front of the people who had broken away from the Protector clan. Without any doubt, requesting one of the Saint rulers to take her to the Arctic was an absurd dream with her current status. She did not even have the right to meet them. As a result, Yu Fengyan could only find Jianchen. She had already begun to treat Jianchen as her only hope to see her daughter again. Jianchen pondered the request. Although some people had managed to flee from the Underworld sect, including the former sect master who was even more powerful than Luo Qi, he was not exactly helpless against them. At the same time, it had been such a long time since he had last seen his sister that he missed her as well. Jianchen made up his mind with that. He said, "Auntie, don't be so sad. Let me organize some things and then I'll take you to the Arctic to go look for sister." "Really? Shangtian, are you really going to take me to see Mingyue?" Yu Fengyan was overjoyed. She grabbed Jianchen's hands excitedly. She knew that if Jianchen turned her down, she would probably never see her daughter ever again unless Changyang Mingyue returned herself. Jianchen nodded, "Of course I'm going to. Auntie, go rest for a while. I'll go organize some things immediately, and then I'll take you with me to the Arctic." Jianchen left the garden and made his way to the back courtyards of the clan. The back courtyards had already become the forbidden grounds of the Changyang clan. No guard was allowed to approach them, and even the patriarch and other important figures of the clan were forbidden from entering the place without giving a prior warning because that was where Changyang Zushao stayed. Other than Changyang Zushao, even Changyang Zuyunshao, Changyang Zuyayun, and the dozen or so saint rulers that had left the Protector clan lived there as well. Meanwhile, all the people that guarded the place were replaced by the Heaven Saint Masters that had left the clan with them. Jianchen saw 4 Heaven Saint Masters sitting at the entrance to the back courtyards as soon as he approached the area. The surroundings were in utter silence. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters opened their eyes at the same time when Jianchen arrived. After recognizing Jianchen, they immediately stood up and politely bowed to him. Even the patriarch of the clan, Changyang, needed to send a message before he could to enter, but Jianchen did not need to. He could go in and out as he wished and no one would stop him. Jianchen amicably nodded to the Heaven Saint Masters before entering the forbidden grounds without any resistance. He had not seen the 4 Heaven Saint Masters before, but he knew they all belonged to the Zhu branch of the Protector clan. They had all come with Changyang Zushao. Jianchen had heard about how the back courtyards had become the forbidden grounds long ago. He did not mind, and even supported the changes. After all, the people who had settled down here had been lead over by Changyang Zushao and Changyang Zuyunshao. Changyang Zushao was a saint king who was already approaching great perfection. Most importantly, Changyang Zushao and Changyang Zushao had left the Protector clan to help him, so even though Jianchen's relationship with them was not deep, he still felt respect for them from the bottom of his heart. Jianchen met Changyang Zushao in a simply adorned hall. Changyang Zushao's hair was pale gray. He seemed even older than he had been back in the Protector clan, and he seemed rather haggard as well. Clearly, leaving the Protector Changyang clan had affected Changyang Zhu Shao on a psychological level. After all, it had been his home for several thousand years. He had deep feelings for it. Jianshan first bowed toward Changyang Zhu Shao, greeting him as a junior, before explaining the reason why he had come. He had come to find Changyang Zhu Shao this time to ask him to prepare against the Saint Kings of the Underworld Sect, to make sure they couldn't do anything detrimental to the clan. Xiang'er, you don't need to worry about that. Although I can't find Saint Kings hiding in the Jessen Kingdom, no Saint King can escape my senses if they enter this small city. The ancient secret techniques of the Protector clans are not as simple as that. However, if the Saint Kings choose to attempt an assassination, I can only protect this city. I am helpless to help the royal family of the kingdom. Considering the fact that your fiancée is a part of the royal family and is the daughter of the king, I'll get Yun Shao to guard the palace. Yun Shao might only be at the 5th heavenly layer, but he knows quite a few secret techniques. Ordinary Saint Kings are not his opponent in a fight, Changyang Zhu Shao said amicably. He treated Jian Shen with great importance, so he completely considered everything related to Jian Shen in this matter. Jian Shen completely stopped worrying after listening to what Changyang Zhu Shao had to say. Hesitating slightly, he asked again, "Great-grandfather, may I ask how much you know about the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall?" Changyang Zhu Shao frowned slightly when he heard the name Arctic Ice Goddess Hall. Only after a moment of silence did he say, "All of my understanding of the Ice Goddess Hall comes from the ancient records of the Protector clan, which all originate from the ancient times, personally written by Saint Emperors. I only know that the organization is extremely powerful, such that even the 4 sovereigns from the ancient times did not venture there. No one knows when the Ice Goddess Hall appeared, but they never interfere with the matters of the continent, nor do they ever appear on the continent. No one else even knows of their existence other than Mercenary City and the 10 Protector clans. Their descent over a decade ago was the first time in the past million years, and it was all recorded by the Protector clans." Changyang Zhu Shao suddenly stared at Jian Chen sternly. He asked with a heavy voice, "Xiang'er, do you plan on visiting the Ice Goddess Hall?" "Correct. My sister is there and I want to visit her," Jian Chen confessed. Changyang Zhu Shao stayed silent for a while before replying with a heavy voice, "Although I've never been to the Ice Goddess Hall, I do know that it is extremely terrifying, because every single record from the Saint Emperor ancestors have warned the descendants to never offend them or try look for them. They must possess some terrifying person, but after so many years, that person feared by our Saint Emperor ancestors must have passed away. However, I still hope you can reconsider your choice. It's best if you don't go. Since the Ice Goddess Hall is so mysterious and power at the same time, why did they make my sister their holy maiden? I don't know if they're scheming something, but you're right. No matter how powerful that person was, even if they had already surpassed Saint Emperor, it's impossible for them to live for so long, so they can't be as terrifying as the past." "I need to go," replied Jian Chen. "Since you've already made up your mind, I won't stop you. But do be careful." Changyang Zhu Shao gave up on stopping Jian Chen, seeing how he could not persuade him. Jian Chen left the back courtyards before going to find Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu again. Jian Chen needed to be cautious with the mysterious and powerful Ice Goddess Hall, so in order to deal with unforeseen events, he ended up deciding on bringing the 3 of them with him. Chapter 12:20, Frozen Statues. The Arctic was to the north of the Tianyuan continent. It was not a part of the landmass, but snowy plains that were separated by the vast sea. The climate there was freezing, and the environment was horrible. Blizzards would erupt from time to time that even Heaven Saint Masters could not withstand. There was also a white haze that filled the sky, which would quickly blow away from time to time as well, leaving behind white streaks in the air. This was the terrifying streams of coldness that were extremely active in the Arctic. It was said that they could even freeze steel into an icy mess. The space of the Arctic was unstable, so it was impossible to arrive there through a space gate. With his second aunt Yufeng Yan, Jian Chen, Nubis, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu passed through a space gate to arrive above the ocean near the Arctic. They then flew toward the plains of ice. Although they had yet to set foot on the icy land, the weather was already extremely cold. The sky was hazy white while the sea water was freezing with huge blocks of ice floating in it. Most of them were Saint Kings, so they were unaffected by the chilliness that was enough to freeze ordinary people into ice statues. Only the weak Yu Fengyan paled because of the cold. Although she wore thick clothing made from fox fur, she still trembled. However, Yu Fengyan was filled with excitement even if that was the case. She felt warm inside over the fact that she would be able to see her daughter. She was willing to go through anything to see her. They arrived on the icy plains very quickly. The temperature was extremely low and the icy wind whistled across the land, cutting at them like sharp blades. Even as Saint Kings, they felt their skin tingle. The wind there could cut Earth Saint Masters into mincemeat easily, so it was impossible for ordinary people to survive there. Crack. Crack. With the soft sounds, Jian Chen, Nubis, Rui Jin, and He Yu's clothes rapidly began to freeze. In just a few seconds, they became snow-white as a thin layer of frost covered them. The next moment, the four of them trembled slightly and easily shook off the frost that had covered them. Their faces remained the same as before, as if the coldness here was nothing. Yu Fengyan had already arrived beside Hong Lian. The streams of coldness were unable to approach Hong Lian due to the waves of heat she gave off. The frigid air turned to nothing before the heat. "Senior Hong Lian, please look after my aunt," Jian Chen said to Hong Lian. Hong Lian was a scorching divine phoenix, a sovereign of fire, so even as an ordinary person, Yu Fengyan would not suffer at all by sticking by her side. Hong Lian nodded slightly. She wrapped her hand around Yu Fengyan and continued on into the snowy plains. The waves of heat from her were warm and gentle. Not only did they pose no harm to Yu Fengyan, they even made her feel like she was basking in the sun. They flew at a low altitude across the snowy plains, making their way to the depths. As they traveled, the temperature plummeted even more. The chilly wind there was already enough to threaten Heaven Saint Master. Unless they could control fire-attributed Saint Force, even those at the sixth cycle would be cut to pieces by the sharp, cold wind. The streams of coldness that flowed past from time to time could turn one of them into an ice statue in a single moment. They flew for 7 days across the icy plains and arrived at the depths. The cold air forced Jian Chen and Nubis to carefully find a solution to deal with it. A thin layer of energy coated their bodies for protection while 3-inch-long ice crystals constantly formed on the surface of He Yu and Rui Jin's bodies, which they would shake to pieces every once in a while. However, the crystals would form again after just a few seconds, and they would have to shake them off again. They had done this for several days already. Yu Fengyan was coated by a layer of flames, so she was unaffected. Just the waves of heat from Hong Lian were not enough to fend off the cold streams of air in the depths. At this moment, the icy plains suddenly began to billow, producing ghost-like wails. A large mass of hazy whiteness quickly flew toward them from right ahead. "Be careful," Jian Chen called out, immediately using the illusory flash to dodge. Nubis, Rui Jin, He Yu, and the others did not fall behind either, avoiding the stream of white haze. Hong Lian called out and the brightness from the flames on her exploded. The roaring flames surrounded her and Yu Fengyan with terrifying heat. The heat was enough to melt steel beams in a single moment, but it could only guard the surrounding radius of a meter from the coldness. Hong Lian's mastery over flames had already reached a level of perfection. She could control the heat of the flames as she wished, so even when engulfed by the terrifying flames, Yu Fengyan did not feel hot at all. Instead, she found them to be extremely warm since they were unable to harm her in any way. The stream of whiteness passed by very quickly. Jian Chen, He Yu, and Rui Jin all successfully avoided it, but Nubis was struck by a stream in the end. The stream of whiteness was only a fist-sized ball of coldness, but it possessed unbelievable power. Nubis turned into an ice statue in a single moment after being struck. Nubis began to shine with a bright, golden light. He had been immobilized by the ice, so he was currently trying to break free with all he had. He produced a few soft cracks in the ice. With his strength as a third heavenly layer Saint King, Nubis was actually unable to break free in a short amount of time. Jianshan stepped over and instantly arrived before him, hurling a punch at Nubis. With a muffled sound, Jianshan's full-powered punch failed to shatter the ice. Only a tiny crack appeared. Jianshan was not surprised. He had witnessed the power of the icy streams long ago. Without saying anything, he immediately hurled another punch. Bang! The cracks expanded once again with the sound, enveloping the ice in all directions like a web. Jianshan punched a third time. Finally, after working from the inside and outside, Nubis broke free with a rumble. Nubis radiated with coldness after breaking free. His face had become pale, and he could not help but shiver, so cold. The great Nubis is going to be frozen to death. Be carefully. Don't get frozen next time. The streams of coldness here are just far too terrifying. If it were any other ordinary third heavenly layer Saint King, they definitely wouldn't have been able to break free without help from another person. They would have been frozen to death on the spot. Jianshan was very stern. The Arctic plains were far more terrifying than he had expected. Where they were right now could already threaten Saint Kings. Jianshan's group continued on. 4 hours later, they had moved another 1,000 kilometers. They could no longer endure the coldness with their bodies alone, so all of them now possessed a layer of energy protecting them. They had become much more cautious than before, and even Rui Jin, Heiyu, and Hong Lian dared not to be careless. Jianshan had also made up his mind about sending Yu Fengyan into the Saint Artifact at any moment in time. This was because the dangers here were already enough to threaten them. After passing over an icy mountain, all of their expressions hardened. 1,000 meters in front of them, several human-shaped statues appeared. They arrived before the ice statues. They were lifelike, and they could clearly see the faces of the sculptures. Every single one of them held different poses, and they could even see a terrifying gaze in the eyes of each statue. Other than that, every single statue radiated with a vague, chilling pressure. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, Heiyu, and Nubis all gradually became solemn. Their faces were completely serious. With their knowledge and experience, they could obviously tell that the statues had not been created from ice but from people that had been frozen alive. These people were all Saint Emperors when they were alive, Rui Jin said in a heavy voice. His expression was extremely stern. Saint Emperors were already existences that stood at the very peak of the Tianyuan continent. They all felt extremely astounded by the fact that such powerful people had been frozen into statues here. These people were even more powerful than the human Saint Emperor when they were still alive, Hong Lian added in a heavy tone. She was obviously referring to the path Lord of Carnal Desires by human Saint Emperor. Jianshan shivered inside. He had learned that the Ice Goddess Hall was very powerful long ago and was viewed as an extremely terrifying existence. But only now did he discover that the hall was far more terrifying than he had ever thought. There's more up ahead. Nubis cried out as he pointed ahead in disbelief. With that, everyone turned to look. 5 huge magical beasts appeared 10 kilometers away, also frozen into lifelike sculptures of ice. Those are Class 9 magical beasts. Heiyu cried out. He was astounded. Chapter 12:21, Urton. They arrived in front of the frozen Class 9 magical beasts next. All the magical beasts were extremely large, and from afar, they seemed like tall structures. 3 of them were felines, 10 meters tall and 50 or 60 meters long. The 4th one was a giant, 2-headed python that sat there. It was 3 meters thick. The 5th magical beast is an unknown mutated beast of antiquity. Its 2 huge wings were extended, covering a distance of several hundred meters. The final magical beast was a 100-meter-tall war beast. It carried a white bone club on its shoulder. Although it had already been frozen into a statue, its wild presence could still be clearly sensed. Jianshan and Nubis looked at each other as shock filled their gazes. Seeing several frozen human Saint Emperors was already stunning enough. They had never thought that they would see another 6 frozen Class 9 magical beasts. Class 9 magical beasts stood at the same level as Saint Emperors. Even in ancient times, Class 9 magical beasts were apex existences along with Saint Emperors when ignoring the 4 great champions. They were supreme. Yet, so many human Saint Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts had been frozen to death on the icy plains, which really affected their thoughts. When did Saint Emperors become so fragile where they would end up freezing to death from the cold? If this news made it to the Tianyuan continent, it would be explosive, able to shake up all the experts on the continent. However, this exact scene just happened to reflect the terrifying power of the Ice Goddess Hall. Saint Emperors reigned supreme on the continent. No matter what identity they possessed before they died, they deserve a corresponding amount of respect. I'll take these Saint Emperors back and bury them on the Tianyuan continent, Jian Chen said in sorrow. He felt sorry for the horrible fate the Saint Emperors had suffered. They were mighty Saint Emperors, yet they met their end by freezing to death in this snowy land. There were not a lot of people throughout history who had suffered such a miserable end. Jian Chen arrived before the Saint Emperor statues. He wanted to put them in his space ring to take them back. Unfortunately, the icy Saint Emperors had fused with the ground, so they were stuck there. Jian Chen pulled out his Emperor armament without hesitation and swung it at the ground. The ice was far tougher than he had imagined. After swinging the weapon a few times with full force, he only left behind a shallow mark. After swinging over 100 times, the frozen Saint Emperor was finally separated from the ground. However, at that moment, a crack rang out. A chink had suddenly appeared in the ice, which expanded at an unbelievable rate. It covered the entire person in just a few seconds. Bang! With a gentle sound, the entire statue shattered. There was no blood at all. The Saint Emperor's flesh had already been frozen. Jian Chen became stunned at this as he stared at the pile of ice that had once been a Saint Emperor. He could not help but sigh inside after witnessing a mighty Saint Emperor end up like this. Jian Chen did not touch the other ice statues. He returned to where the Class 9 magical beast statues were. After hesitating slightly, he jumped up and swung the Emperor armament at a feline magical beast. After attacking several dozen times, Jian Chen finally beheaded the statue. As soon as the water tank-sized head fell to the ground, it shattered with a bang, reduced to an icy mess. Crack! 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 The next moment, the cracks on the headless body quickly spread and turned it into an icy mess as well. Jian Chen looked through the mess, but he failed to find a complete Class 9 monster core. All he found were pieces of a frozen monster core. All of its energy had drained away, so it was useless. Jian Chen was disappointed. He already understood that the frozen Class 9 magical beasts were worth nothing, and they could not be touched just like the human Saint Emperors, or they would be reduced to an icy mess. Even their space rings would be destroyed. These Saint Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts have died far too long ago. Their flesh has completely fused and turned into ice, Rui Jin sighed. He felt rather heavy-hearted. They've been dead for at least several hundreds of thousands of years, said Nubis. Let's continue, Jian Chen signaled everyone. They no longer paid attention to the ice statues and continued on. As they rapidly traveled deeper into the icy plains, they came across quite a few ice statues. There were both humans and magical beasts, but they were all at the level of Saint Emperor. None of them were weaker than Saint Emperor. This place is just too terrifying. We've found over 30 Saint Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts that have been frozen into statues, Nubis said with a slight tremble to his voice. He had already begun to feel some dread for this place. This was basically a graveyard for Saint Emperors. An hour later, they traveled another 500 kilometers. The temperature there half dropped even lower. Jian Chen and Nubis were already using everything they had to stay warm while Yu Fengyan had been sent into the artifact space by Jian Chen. Even Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had donned their origin armor. There's another fallen expert here, Nubis said as he pointed ahead. An extremely burly man sat on the ground. His eyes were tightly closed, having died long ago. There's words. Jian Chen said with a hoarse voice. A line of words had been carved into the ice right in front of the man. I am Urton. I was invincible. After several hundred years of secluded cultivation, I failed to break through to the origin realm. I learned of the mysterious ice goddess hall from ancient records and came to find them, but who would have thought that I would freeze to death before I could even catch a glimpse of them? I am unwilling. I am filled with unwillingness for falling here, Urton. It's actually Urton. He's the ruler of the beast god continent 500,000 years ago. It's said that he was the strongest magical beast, having reached the peak of Class 9. No one was his opponent among the humans and the magical beasts. I never thought he ended up dying here, Nubis cried out. Chapter 12:22. Changyang Mingyue Jian Chen trembled inside when he heard that. After examining the frozen middle-aged man again, he felt exceptionally shocked inside. Even the ruler of the beast god continent, having reached the apex of Saint Emperor and only a single step away from the supreme origin realm, had frozen to death here as well. The shock that it brought Jian Chen was far greater than seeing the 30-odd Saint Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts earlier. The power of peak Saint Emperors was incomparable to regular Saint Emperors. The difference was akin to the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler and the 1st heavenly layer of Saint King or Saint Kings at great perfection and those who had only recently became Saint Kings. Although they belonged to the same level of cultivation, the disparity was enormous. Not only was Urton a peak Saint Emperor, he was a beast of antiquity as well. He was even more powerful than human peak Saint Emperors, and it would be true to call him the strongest beneath the origin realm. Yet, even someone like Urton could not avoid being frozen into a statue. Not only this made Jian Chen and Nubis shiver inside, even Rui Jin, He Yu, and Hong Lian felt the same. 500,000 years ago, Urton was invincible. There was no one who could defeat him, but he actually met his end on these icy plains and did not fall in battle. This place is just too terrifying, Nubis said in shock. He was shivering inside. His fear for this place had become much heavier after seeing Urton's frozen corpse. It was not just Nubis. Even Jian Chen felt a sliver of dread. The icy plains were far too terrifying, just the icy climate was enough to freeze Saint Emperors to death. No wonder the Saint Emperor ancestors of the Protector clans were so fearful of the Ice Goddess Hall. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu looked at each other and became extremely solemn. Even before Saint Emperors, they had never shown such a serious expression before. Nubis bowed deeply to Urton before continuing on with Jian Chen and the others. They did not touch Urton's corpse, not even the space ring on his finger. With what they had experienced earlier, they all knew that both Urton and his space ring had been reduced to ice after so many years. His entire body would turn into an icy mess after the layer of ice on the surface was destroyed. Everyone felt very heavy inside after witnessing what had happened to Urton. They did not say anything and continued on in a straight path. After traveling for another 100 kilometers, Nubis could no longer endure it any longer as the weakest. He was sucked into the artifact space by Jian Chen. If it were not for Jian Chen's chaotic body and the chaotic force, he probably would not have been able to last until now either. The coldness had reached an extremely terrifying level where even the Saint Force of Saint Kings could be frozen. The only reason why Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu could continue on was because they used their own great powers along with the origin energy armor. However, they knew very well that the coldness was far weaker than several hundreds of thousand years ago. Otherwise, they would not have been able to make it further than Urton with their strength as Saint Kings. They might have already been frozen into lifelike statues before they had even seen the Saint Emperor statues. They traveled another half a day, but they only traveled 500 kilometers during that time. They were obstructed by a layer of boundless cold mist. The mist seemed to form a natural barrier, stopping them in their path. This mist is something else, Hong Lian said heavily as she stared at the mist after they all had stopped. It was illogical for mist to exist at such a terrifyingly cold temperature. Mist was fine droplets of water, yet it was impossible for water to exist in this wasteland because all of it should have frozen into ice that was tougher than steel. You guys stay here first. I'll go in and have a look, said Hong Lian. The flames on her glowed much brighter and the scorching god fire hairpin appeared in her hands. She carefully made her way into the region of mist. As soon as she stepped into the mist, a hissing sound was immediately produced from the contact of mist and flames. However, the mist was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Hong Lian only lasted a few seconds before her roaring flames were suppressed by the mist. Within the next few seconds, the flames had been forced back into her body. The coldness rapidly drew closer to Hong Lian, where even her fire-red feathermail became coated by a thin layer of white frost. Hong Lian paled in fright. She had realized long ago that the mist was nowhere near as simple as it seemed, but in no way did she ever expect it to be so terrifying. Without holding back, white flames surged from her hairpin, engulfing her in a single moment. The power of the white flames was incomparable to the power of the red flames. As soon as they appeared, the ice crystals on her melted and even the mist around her was forced back by 3 inches. Hong Lian was relieved. She continued on as she protected herself with her hairpin. However, the coldness in the mist increases as she went deeper inside. Taking just the first step, the mist grew half an inch closer to her, now 2.5 inches away. When she took a second step, the mist grew another half an inch closer, now 2 inches away. With the third step, it was 1.5 inches away, and with the fourth, it was only an inch away from her. Hong Lian gently sighed as she looked at the white haziness that showed no signs of ending. She carefully backed off. She knew if she took a 5th step, the coldness would end up pressing against her skin and she would be frozen into a statue. Even with her origin energy weapon, it might not be enough to keep her safe. You should all see as well. The mist is far more terrifying than we imagined. Even I can only take a few steps. You can't make it through it, Hong Lian said with some dejection. She reigned supreme with fire and could conquer the cold. However, even the mist did not open a path for her even after she had brandished her origin energy weapon. She was unable to lighten up no matter what over this. Jian Chen frowned as well. He could obviously see just how terrifying the mist was, but it seemed to form a barrier stopping them. It was boundless, so if they could not pass through it, they could only end their journey there, let alone find the Ice Goddess Hall. At the same time, in a room completely constructed from ice, a lady, who seemed to be around 20 years of age, sat on a white piece of ice as she cultivated. The lady was extremely pretty, such that her beauty could outshine the moon. She was completely snow white, not only her hair, but her eyebrows and eyelashes as well. The lady was Changyang Mingyue, who had left the clan many years ago. Suddenly, Changyang Mingyue opened her eyes. Her face lit up in surprise, and she excitedly said, "Brother, it's my brother. I can see my brother." With that, she leaped off the ice and ran out of the room as a white blur. There was a room completely constructed from snow and ice, and all the decor in there was created from ice crystals. They shone brightly and were extremely pretty. Although the room was wonderfully decorated, it was all snow white. There was only white, and the temperature there had also reached an unbelievably low level. Compared to the temperature in the room, an eternal cavern of ice was like a scorching volcano. A person clad in white armor sat on a bed of ice in the room. Her eyes were closed and the armor completely covered her, only revealing her eyes. Even her face was concealed. At this moment, the door to the room forcefully swung open. Changyang Mingyue ran in with bare feet in joy as she urgently said, "Protector Shui, I can see my brother. I can see my brother. My brother's come, and he's been obstructed by the profound ice chi outside. Let him in quick." Her voice was filled with excitement. Perhaps due to being overjoyed, a faint red flush had appeared on her pale white face. Protector Shui slowly opened her eyes. She could not help but gently sigh when she saw how excited Changyang Mingyue was. She said, "Your Majesty, can't you just forget about them?" The them she had mentioned was not just Jian Chen, it included all the people in the Changyang clan and all the people Changyang Mingyue once knew. Changyang Mingyue became angered. Protector Shui, I can never forget my brother. He will always be my brother, so hurry up and let him in. Sigh, Protector Shui exhaled. Helplessness filled her eyes. Chapter 1223, Reuniting Mother and Daughter. 1. Jian Chen, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu camped for quite some time outside the hazy mist. All of them frowned, but none of them could do anything to the terrifying mist, including Rui Jin. Rui Jin and Hong Lian used countless secret techniques of their clans during that time, but they were all useless. Even Jian Chen's presence was unable to penetrate through the mist. As soon as his presence entered it, the chilling coldness would attack his mind by following his presence, stunning him to the point where he no longer dared to make any future attempts. Looks like this is as far as we can go, Jian Chen said in a heavy voice. He was extremely disappointed. He had never thought that they would fail to even catch a single glimpse of the Ice Goddess Hall despite bringing such a powerful party. At this moment, the mist ahead began to churn violently, slowly parting open. Very soon, a 3-meter-wide path formed in front of the four of them, and at the end of the path was a snow-white and bright glacial world, not a hazy mist. They all looked at each other after the passageway suddenly appeared. They had never thought that the mist that had stopped them from traveling further would create a path. They were in disbelief. Suddenly, Jian Chen seemed to think of something. His eyes immediately lit up and he said, I understand. This layer of mist must be controlled by someone, and the controller probably knows of our arrival, which is why they've formed a tunnel for us to get through. However, Jian Chen could not help but think about how his sister had become the holy maiden of the Ice Goddess Hall. He guessed that Changyang Mingyue possessed quite the status within the Ice Goddess Hall, but he was uncertain if the formation of the tunnel had anything to do with her. With the tunnel, the four of them gave up on the thought of returning. They then carefully passed through it. The tunnel in the mist was 1,000 meters long. The four of them passed through it very soon and arrived in a region beyond the mist. The environment past the mist was like heaven compared to the climate outside. Although it was still a world of ice and snow, the landscape was pretty, picturesque like a lovely drawing. The surrounding glaciers were crystal clear, like huge mountains of crystal. If the region outside the mist was like the churning sea, this would be a flat and peaceful part of the ocean. There was no terrifying wind or any icy temperatures that could freeze Saint Kings to death. Outside, even regular Saint Kings would struggle to survive, yet even people as weak as Earth's Saint Masters could move around freely here. Although the two places were only separated by 1,000 meters of mist, they felt like they were two completely different worlds. Is this the Ice Goddess Hall? Suddenly, He Yu pointed ahead and asked. They looked to where he was pointing, and 20 kilometers away, a crystal palace that seemed to have been carved from ice stood quietly on the icy plains. It gave off a respectful presence, as if it had stood through many years of wind and rain. Although it was grand and beautiful, the four of them could clearly feel that it was filled with the ancient presence of time. The crystal palace seemed to have stood all by itself for countless years, while the ancient presence was far heavier than any item they had ever seen that had managed to survive through the ages. This must be the Ice Goddess Hall. We've finally arrived, Jian Chen mumbled as he stared at the divine hall up ahead. His voice was filled with some excitement, and he instinctively began to walk over in a hurry. The four of them stopped in front of the Ice Goddess Hall very soon. Only by standing in front of the structure could they feel its grandeur. They felt like ants standing before an elephant. The feeling did not seem to linger around the building, but from the vast presence of the structure. Dazed, they suddenly felt a different impression, as if they were not facing against the pretty Ice Goddess Hall, but the infinite cosmos. A person in silver-white armor stood silently at the top of the structure. Her armor covered every part of her, including her face. Only 2 icy cold eyes were revealed, but it was still possible to tell that she was female from the shape of her body. She stood there unmoving like an ice statue, nor did she give off any presence. She seemed to have completely fused with the surroundings, becoming a part of the world. Protector Shui glanced over the four of them with her emotionless eyes, but to them, she seemed to be transparent. None of them discovered her existence. Chapter 1224, Reuniting Mother and Daughter. 2. Jian Chen, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu all observed the huge divine hall in front of them unblinkingly. The ancient, vast presence struck their souls in waves, filling them with deep shock. Rui Jin and Hong Lian were the first ones to calm down. They stared sternly at the divine hall, and a similar thought crossed both their minds. The divine hall did not belong to this world at all. With a rumble, the crystal door slowly opened. A completely snow-white beauty silently stood there with bare feet as a certain coldness immediately surged out. Brother. The lady focused all her attention on Jian Chen, as if Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu were all transparent. Her face was filled with great joy and excitement while her voice slightly trembled. Jian Chen's gaze also landed on her. Although they had not seen each other for over a decade, he was still able to recognize her at first glance. She was the person he was searching for, his sister Changyang Mingyue. Sister. Jian Chen cried out as his heart began to churn as well. Other than Bai Yuntian, his sister had cared for him the most when he was young. At that time, his brother Changyang bullied him several times, and every time Changyang Mingyue saw him, she would stand on his side without any hesitation. As a result, Jian Chen viewed his sibling kinship with her in an extremely important light, even surpassing his brotherhood with Changyang Hu. It was just a pity after the matters that had occurred with the Huayan sect back then, Jian Chen was forced to leave Lore City. He never saw his sister again and did not even hear any news involving her. Both he and Yu Fengyan ended up believing many times that Changyang Mingyue had suffered an accident, filling them both with sorrow. Changyang Mingyue stepped over the great door sill and ran toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen also emotionally ran to her. As they grew closer and closer, Jian Chen could feel the temperature around him rapidly plummet. When they were only 10 meters away, Jian Chen had become covered in a white layer of frost. Jian Chen quickly calmed down. He could feel the sudden drop in temperature in his surroundings and could not help but feel secretly shocked. However, what surprised him even more was that all the coldness actually came from Changyang Mingyue. Changyang Mingyue's face immediately changed when she saw the layer of frost on Jian Chen. She immediately halted and rapidly backed off, drawing far away from Jian Chen. At the same time, she urgently cried out, "Don't come over." Jian Chen stopped and looked at her from 30 meters away. He asked, "Sister, just what is happening? Why are you radiating such coldness?" Changyang Mingyue radiated with an extremely cold presence. If it were not for the fact that they were in a world of ice and snow, probably a thick layer of ice would have formed in the radius of several thousand meters. Even bodies of water would end up freezing. Changyang Mingyue was pained. "Brother, it's my profound ice body. My profound ice body has not fully matured yet, so I can't control the profound ice chi that I radiate. How have you become like this, sister? What is all this about?" Jian Chen asked rather urgently. In his memory, his sister had never been like this before. "It's a long story. I'll tell you about it in detail later, but I heard from Protector Shui that you came across a few problems a few years ago. Are some large clans or sects bullying you? Don't worry. Once my profound ice body fully matures, I'll go to the Tian Yuan continent and teach all those people a lesson," Changyang Mingyue firmly promised. She cared for Jian Chen very much, as if he was an eternal child in her eyes. Jian Chen suddenly felt extremely warm inside. Thinking back to his youth, wasn't this exactly how his sister watched over him? She did not want him to be bullied at all, and his brother Changyang had been secretly punished by her several times. What she did not know was whenever Changyang tried to bully him, he would not only fail, but end up getting the short end of the stick himself. He had never succeeded in benefiting at Jian Chen's expense. Has mother been well? And how have father, first aunt, third aunt, and fourth aunt been? What about big brother and Uncle Chang? I actually really want to go home. I miss mother so much, but I can't right now. Protected Shui won't let me, Changyang Mingyue said in a rather depressed manner. Her joy from seeing Jian Chen just now gradually faded away as worry filled her face. She wanted to go home far too much. Jianshan suddenly snapped back to his sense as soon as he heard about Yu Fengyan. He immediately retreated to Hong Lian's side and released Yu Fengyan from the Saint artifact. Originally, Jianshan only planned on letting her out, but Nubis ended up coming out as well when he heard that they had arrived at the Ice Goddess Hall. Although the coldness was much less than outside, it was still not something that Yu Fengyan could endure as a great Saint Master. Fortunately Hong Lian's was there to help out, keeping the low temperature at bay with her flames. Mother. Changyang Mingyue became so excited to the point that she could not express her emotions properly when she saw Yu Fengyan. She charged up without thinking, but she stopped after just 2 steps. Tears rolled down her face as she slowly backed off in pain. She knew just how powerful the profound ice chi she radiated with was. It was not something Yu Fengyan could endure. Yu Fengyan became stunned the moment she saw Changyang Mingyue. Tears poured uncontrollably from her eyes while an endless number of thoughts bounced around. She bit her lip tightly as she stared at Changyang Mingyue and could not help but tremble violently. Mingyue! Yu Fengyan called out the next moment and quickly ran toward Changyang Mingyue. There was only one thing she wanted to do right now, and that was to tightly embrace her daughter who she had thought of daily. How could Jianshan let Yu Fengyan run over? As soon as she began to move she was blocked by Jianshan. Xiangtian, let me through. Don't block me. Xiangtian, I'm begging you. Let me through. Yu Fengyan struggled in the space frozen by Jianshan as she pleaded through her sobs. Jianshan's heart ached inside. If he didn't need to, he really would not have stopped Yu Fengyan, but he was considering her safety right now. No matter how reluctant he was, he needed to stop her. Aunt, sister's profound ice body radiates a terrifying coldness. You can't go over, or you'll be frozen into an ice statue, Jianshan bitterly explained. I don't care. Even if I freeze to death, I don't care. Xiangtian, I'm begging you, don't stop me. Just let me through. I just want to get a good look at Mingyue, Yu Fengyan sobbed. Chapter 1225, Protector Shui moves. Jianshan shook his head with a bitter face. He could not let anything happen to his second aunt. Even if she ended up nursing grievances against him, he would not let her through. With his current strength, he could only manage to get 10 meters away from Changyang Mingyue. If it were Yu Fengyan, she probably would have been reduced to a frozen sculpture before she even reached 20 meters away. Mother, don't come over. You can't come over. Changyang Mingyue loudly sobbed as tears ran down her face. She was extremely sorrowful as she backed off step by step, moving further and further away from Yu Fengyan. After parting for almost 10 years, the two of them had finally met again in this land of ice and snow, but they could only look at each other from 100 meters away. This was extremely painful to both of them. In the end, the two of them began asking about each other from 100 meters away. All their thoughts throughout the years poured out like a flood. Unknowingly, the two of them had already talked for most of the day, but the sky did not show any changes at all, as if night did not exist in this land. Your Majesty, you should return now. Your profound ice body has yet to fully mature, so you can't leave the Divine Hall for too long. At this moment, an emotionless voice suddenly rang out. Protector Shui finally spoke while she stood on the Divine Hall. Jianshan, Ruijin, Hong Lian, and He Yu were all startled inside by the voice. They looked to the place where the voice originated from. Only at that moment did they realize that there was another person standing high up, fully clad in armor. Ruijin, Hong Lian, and He Yu narrowed their eyes the moment they saw her while their hearts wildly churned inside. This was because all three of them felt tricked at the same time. The protector had definitely been there before they had even arrived. She did not conceal herself and had instead casually stood there, yet they had failed to notice her. The three of them also understood that if she did not speak, they would never have discovered her existence. Ruijin, Hong Lian, and He Yu looked at each other as their complexions became horrible. Not only were they unable to see through her strength, they could not even sense her presence, as if she was just thin air. They could only see her with their eyes. Surpassed Saint Emperor. At this moment, the same thought appeared in all their heads. They had fought against Saint Emperors more than once, so they obviously had an extremely good understanding of experts at that level, yet Protector Shui's existence was completely different. They had never witnessed her fight, nor did they know her strength, but they were extremely certain that she was definitely a supreme existence that had surpassed Saint Emperor. The three of them were utterly astounded by the fact that there were still existences that had surpassed Saint Emperor in this age that lacked Saint Emperors. Changyang Mingyue looked at Jian Chen and Yu Fengyan, reluctant to leave. She said, "Mother, brother, I will return. Don't worry, mother, once my profound ice body matures, I'll definitely visit home." Yu Fengyan felt a stabbing pain inside now that she was about to part with her beloved daughter. She looked at Changyang Mingyue's face in reluctance as tears rolled down her face. "Brother, if you ever come across anything you can't deal with in the future, come look for me. No matter what it is, I can solve it for you. I heard from Protector Shui that you've already become very powerful and are now a Saint King, but don't look down on me. I'm also a Saint King and at the 9th heavenly layer. You're not my opponent right now." Changyang Mingyue faintly smiled with that. It seemed a little like she was boasting. "What? You're a 9th heavenly layer Saint King now?" Jian Chen was shocked and disbelief was plastered across his face. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu became astounded as well. "Remember to come visit me in a year's time. I have a gift for you. Also, these icy plains are the territory of Protector Shui. She'll know every single thing that happens here. I've ordered her to bring you over as long as you are standing on the icy plains." With that, Changyang Mingyue disappeared inside the divine hall. "Mingyue, I'll be waiting for you to return home. Cultivate well," Yu Fengyan called out when the door had closed. "Aunt, sister is very well here. She'll return without much longer. Don't be so sorrowful," Jian Chen comforted. Yu Fengyan clearly understood that it was a great fortune for Changyang Mingyue to stay in this icy land, so she calmed down very quickly. All the worry and anxiety in her heart was rapidly vanishing without her knowing after personally seeing that Changyang Mingyue was well. Some light returned to her eyes and her mood took a drastic turn for the better. Jian Chen looked toward Protector Shui and clasped his hands. "Senior, there is still one matter that confuses me. May I ask why my sister has become the Holy Maiden? Please enlighten me." Jian Chen was extremely curiously as to why Changyang Mingyue had become the Holy Maiden of the Ice Goddess Hall. However, he also knew that probably even Changyang Mingyue had no idea how to answer the question, which was why he asked Protector Shui. He had already learned from Changyang Mingyue that she was the most powerful person in the Ice Goddess Hall. Her strength was unfathomable. She stood supreme in the organization with everyone else working beneath her. "You have no right to know about matters concerning Her Majesty. If it weren't for the fact that you were siblings with Her Majesty, you lot would have frozen to death on the icy plains long ago. How would you still have been able to make it here?" Protector Shui's voice was extremely cold, as if she was completely emotionless. Shortly afterward, she turned to Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu. She looked at them like ants and said, "Tell me, where did you obtain the saint artifacts that contain a sliver of origin energy?" The three of them looked at each other and they felt an ill omen. They hesitated slightly but still ended up responding, "They were given to us by the ancient winged tiger god." "The winged tiger god," mumbled Protector Shui. She said, "So it really was that beast. I never thought he'd be far more complicated than I had imagined, actually able to deliver saint artifacts here without me noticing." Protector Shui fell silent for some time. She pondered for a while before continuing, "The saint artifacts on the three of you shouldn't have appeared in this world. Seeing how you're related to Her Majesty, I won't make things difficult for you. Hand over the saint artifacts, and I'll destroy them." The three of them changed in expression with that. The Sacred Dragon's armor and the Sacred Dragon's sword were clan treasures of the Dragon clan, while the 9 refined Godfire Feathermail and Scorching Godfire Hairpin were clan treasures of the Scorching Divine Phoenix clan. These items held significant value to them, so how could they just hand them over? "Senior, you say you want to destroy the clan treasures of the Dragon Clan and Phoenix Clan as soon as you start talking. Aren't you going overboard? Jian Chen was furious as well. He spoke with a dark expression. Correct. The treasures are even more important than our lives. It's impossible if you want us to hand them over so you can destroy them, Rui Jin angrily replied. Even though he knew that Protector Shui was someone who had surpassed Saint Emperor, he still showed no fear. The only way for you to destroy the clan treasures of the Phoenix Clan is by stepping over my dead body, Hong Lian spoke firmly as well. Her eyes burned with red light since she was furious as well. I would obviously do nothing if your clan treasures were still how they were originally, but now, they've stopped being the same. They're saint artifacts that don't belong to this world, so I will obviously destroy them. I'll let the three of you choose. Hand them over to me and I'll let you leave without a single scratch, or stay here with the saint artifacts, said Protector Shui slowly. Humph, you've said in such a firm manner that Senior Rui Jin and Hong Lian's clan treasures were no longer the same as before. Have you personally seen the treasures before? Jian Chen coldly asked, but he was extremely nervous inside. Rui Jin and Hong Lian became extremely ugly. They both had inherited memories, so they obviously understood the treasures very well. They understood that they were indeed very indifferent from how they were before. They had already discovered this the moment they had obtained them. Yu could not help but draw his origin energy machete and a layer of armor appeared on his at the same time. He furiously said, I don't care who you are, but it's impossible if you want to destroy our origin energy treasures. So what if you surpassed Saint Emperor? I'd like to see just how powerful these sovereign-like existences are. A vast presence erupted from Yu as he poured surging energy into his machete, allowing it to glow bright. Powerful blade chi filled the surroundings. Yu knew that Protector Shui was extremely powerful, having surpassed Saint Emperor, so he used all his strength. Protector Shui looked at Yu coldly and in disdain. She did nothing, but the next moment, a layer of clear ice crystals quickly spread up from his feet. The crystals of ice moved extremely quickly, coating his entire body in the blink of an eye. Equipped with both the origin energy armor and weapon, Yu had been frozen into a statue of ice before he could even deal a single attack. Chapter 1226. Trapped at the Ice Goddess Hall, Rui Jin and Hong Lian were immediately shocked when they saw Yu freeze into a statue in the blink of an eye. Yu was protected by the origin energy armor and possessed an origin energy weapon for offense. He could even stand against Saint Emperors without suffered defeat, yet he was so fragile before Protector Shui, having frozen without being able to resist at all. They had finally witnessed the terror of someone who had surpassed Saint Emperor. Jian Chen and Nubis stared at the frozen Yu in shock as well while their hearts churned inside. Yu Fengyan could also tell that the three of them had fallen out with Protector Shui. She immediately became nervous. She knew that they had helped her quite a lot for her to stand here today, so she was obviously extremely unwilling for anything to happen to them. In her opinion, the reason why the three of them had traveled so far to come to the Ice Goddess Hall was related to her. If the three of them were in trouble because of her, she would be filled with remorse. Senior, is it possible to let Senior Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and Yu go on Mingyue's behalf? Yu Fengyan called out. She really did not wish to see the three of them remain trapped here because of her. Protector Shui's eyes were cold and completely emotionless, like ice that would never melt. Although she had heard Yu Fengyan's request, she did nothing. She did not even glance at her, completely ignoring her. In reality, Yu Fengyan definitely would not have been able to stand there unharmed if it were not for the fact that she was the mother of the Holy Maiden. Are you going to have your saint artifacts destroyed, or will you be staying here forever? Protector Shui coldly asked Rui Jin and Hong Lian. Even if I know we're not your opponent, we'll never hand over the clan treasures. The only way for you to destroy them is by doing it over my dead body, Rui Jin coldly replied before beginning to glow all over with golden light. The dazzling light of the sacred dragon's armor and sword covered his body as terrifying ripples of energy pulsed around him. A packed layer of golden dragon scales quickly appeared as well, enveloping his entire body. Even his hands turned into huge dragon claws. At the same time, fire surged into the sky beside him. With a clear phoenix's cry, Hong Lian turned into a giant phoenix that was several dozen meters long and surrounded by roaring flames. The 9 refined god fire feathermail covered her body as the scorching god fire hairpin hovered above her head. The flames around her rapidly turned to a pure white, radiating with terrifying heat. Nubis, Ant, you two enter the artifact space first. When Rui Jin and Hong Lian transformed, Jian Shen did not stand around either. He sent the two of them into the artifact space as soon as he could. A deafening roar and a clear cry rang out at the same time. Rui Jin and Hong Lian moved at the same time, dealing a full-powered attack together. The sacred dragon's sword glowed with dazzling light as it was swung toward Protector Shui with a shocking might. The scorching god fire hairpin was surrounded by scorching white flames. It radiated with heat that was even more terrifying than the sun while it shot at Protector Shui with unbelievable speed as a white streak of light. Wherever it passed, the air became filled with a burnt smell. It seemed to be incinerating air. Looks like you've already made your choices. Very well. Protector Shui coldly said. A gleam of light flashed through her eyes and the sword and hairpin came to a halt. An invisible barrier seemed to have stopped them in their paths. They could not travel any further no matter how terrifying they were. The next moment, a layer of ice crystals appeared on the two weapons. The sharp presence of the sword and the terrifying white flames of the hairpin were unable to stop the rapid expansion of the ice. Wherever the crystals formed, froze the sword chi in place and instantly extinguished the white flames. In the blink of an eye, the invincible weapons were frozen in the air by a thin layer of frost. Shock was spelled across Rui Jin and Hong Lian's faces. The next moment, their faces suddenly hardened. The moment had become eternal as a thin layer of frost silently appeared on them as well. The ice crystals engulfed them before they could even react, turning them into ice statues. Although the layer of ice was thin, it possessed unbelievable might. Not only did it freeze them, an extremely cold stream invaded their bodies as well, freezing their energy and their souls. At that moment, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had all fallen unconscious. To them, time seemed to have stopped. Senior! Jian Chen furiously shouted. He arrived beside Rui Jin and constantly threw punches at the ice. Each fist possessed all his strength as he attempted to free Rui Jin by smashing the frost. However, the crystals were extraordinarily tough despite how thin they were. Jian Chen's fists, which could easily destroy entire mountains, only produced faint thuds as they struck the ice. He could not even leave a mark on the ice, let alone smash through it. Jian Chen drew his emperor armament after seeing how his punches were useless. He stabbed out with everything he had. Ding! As the sharp sword tip struck the ice crystals, the sword resonated at a clear frequency. His attack had basically reached the level of peak 7th heavenly layer Saint Kings, yet they were still unable to leave a single mark on the ice. Jian Chen did not give up. He roared at the sky as his hair and clothes fluttered from his aura. He swung the emperor armament at the ice that trapped Rui Jin, which rang out every single time he struck it. All his attacks contained everything he had, but the layer of frost remained unscathed despite wildly swinging the sword several hundred times. He still failed to leave behind a mark. Protector Shui stood unmoving on top of the divine hall like an ice sculpture. She coldly stared at Jian Chen and said, "Go. You can't break through my extreme ice lock. You can't even if you're a saint emperor." Jian Chen knew that he could not break through the thin layer of frost, so he stopped his pointless actions. He turned toward Protector Shui and said, "Senior, you've already frozen up the clan treasures. Can't you let the 3 seniors go? I am already acting on behalf of the Holy Maiden for letting you leave unharmed, yet you want to bicker with me?" Her eyes became much sharper now as heavy killing intent lingered with her words. With a wave of her hand, Jian Chen suddenly disappeared from the icy plains. Jian Chen only felt like he had been trapped by an invisible force. The force was extremely great, so great that he actually felt like he was facing something as vast as the universe. He felt as weak as an ant before the force, lacking any power to resist at all. The thought of resisting had not even crossed his mind. Oh no. Is the protector going to do something to me? Jian Chen's heart sank. However, as soon as he thought that, he felt his body lighten. The invisible force had suddenly disappeared, which was then followed by a wave of heat sweeping over him. The world of ice had vanished. He now stood in a desolate region of land. Jian Chen knew that he had returned to the Tianyuan continent, but he could not brighten up no matter what, because Rui Jin, Hong Lian and He Yu remained trapped on the icy plains of the north. They had not returned with him. Suddenly, Jian Chen shot into the sky toward the clouds. He hovered in the air as he pulled out a map, quickly finding his bearings. He discovered that he was not very far away from the sea that separated the Arctic from the continent. With a thought, a golden streak of light immediately flew out of area between his eyebrows. It turned into a fist-sized golden tower that hovered in the air. Artifact Spirit, find a place to hide with my aunt and Nubis. I'll be going to the Ice Goddess Hall again. If I don't return in 7 days, get Nubis to take you to the Changyang clan in Lore City, Jian Chen said to the Golden Tower. Receiving an order, the Golden Tower immediately transformed into a golden streak of light and disappeared into the ground. Jian Chen traveled toward the Arctic once more all by himself. A day later, Jian Chen crossed the vast seas and landed on the icy plains again. He used the illusory flash as he hurried to the depths of the icy plains as a blur. When Jian Chen had traveled less than 10 kilometers, a terrifying stream of coldness seemed to have descended on him. The temperature there seemed to have plummeted suddenly and a layer of frost quickly formed on Jian Chen. Jian Chen knew that it might have been a warning from Protector Shui, but he was not afraid at all. He continued on at the same speed, circulating his chaotic force as fast as he could to resist the terrifying temperature. Jian Chen could not allow Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu to remain trapped on the icy plains because of him. He knew his only chance at saving them was through his sister, so his intentions were very simple. He wanted to approach the Ice Goddess Hall to alert his sister. More and more crystals formed on Jian Chen as his movements slowed down as well. The bone-chilling coldness constantly attempted to invade his body and freeze all signs of life within him, but it was obstructed by the tenacious chaotic force. If you don't back out of the plains right now, you'll end up the same as the three of them, an icy cold and hazy voice rang through Jian Chen's head. Senior, please let them go, or I will never stop. Jian Chen replied. However, right when he said that, an extremely terrifying coldness engulfed him. Even his chaotic body was unable to stop it for a moment. He was instantly frozen into a lifelike sculpture and was completely immobilized. Jian Chen lost control over his body even as he devoted all his efforts to controlling the chaotic force to ward off the invading coldness, but the chaotic force was frozen as soon as it came in contact with the presence. He lost control over it. Jian Chen was astounded, but he was unable to stop the advance of the coldness no matter how hard he tried. It quickly spread through his body, freezing up his blood, his flesh, and all signs of life within him. Even his chaotic Niden and his Dantian was frozen. At the same time, the coldness quickly spread toward his head in attempt to freeze his soul. However, Jian Chen's sea of consciousness suddenly began to glow with an azure and violet light. It glowed with a brightness that was comparable to the morning sun as soon as the coldness neared his head. The dazzling light illuminated his entire sea of consciousness. Chapter 12:27. The Sea Goddess knew the azure and violet light engulfed Jian Chen's sea of consciousness, protecting it at the same time. As soon as the terrifying coldness came in contact with the lights, it came to a halt, no longer able to advance any further. What coldness! Master, where have you come? Why is there such great coldness where even your chaotic Niden has been frozen? Ziying's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head in shock. Not only did Jian Chen lose control over his body, he had also lost all of his senses. The moment the sword spirits began protecting his soul, his consciousness had entered his sea of consciousness without choice. A five-colored crystal hovered within the sea of consciousness. It was the multicolored stone Jian Chen had come across by accident and purchased in Walorant City back then. During these past years, the sword spirits had been absorbing the pure energy within it, and thus, the stone was smaller than before. An azure and violet light rotated around the stone. The two lights seemed to be connected with one another but not, at the same time. It seemed as if a certain distance was always maintained. They were the original forms of the sword spirits, but they were deeper in color than before. Jian Chen knew that they had become much more powerful after absorbing the stone and recovering. Although the sword spirits were recovering in Jian Chen's sea of consciousness, they clearly did not pay attention to everything, so they didn't know that Jian Chen had come across the Ice Goddess Hall. Jian Chen explained everything he had gone through at the Ice Goddess Hall in full detail, immediately causing the sword spirits to fall into a temporary silence. Only a while later did Ziying sternly say, "Qing Suo and I once felt someone secretly observing us through their presence, but we were far too weak back then so we could not find where that person was hiding. But now, it looks like that person is Protector Shui. Master, this Protector Shui is extremely powerful. She shouldn't be a person of this world, and you're completely helpless against her with your current strength. You mustn't go out of your way to provoke her. Are you saying that she's the same as me, from another world?" Jian Chen questioned in surprise. "Correct, that's indeed the case. However, the only difference is that Master came from the bottom while she came from the top. She's extremely powerful, but her strength suffers the restrictions of the world, so she can't act freely, much less break the balance here, or she'll be punished by the world. As long as you don't provoke her, you should be fine," said Ziying. Jian Chen's heart sank. He had never thought that Protector Shui would possess such great origins where she was an expert from a higher world. In other words, he was unable to save Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu anytime soon. It would even be impossible for him to see his sister if the Protector obstructed them intentionally. Although the sword spirits had said that the Protector could not act freely, it meant that she could not do things without reason. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu's origin energy treasures had been described by her as saint artifacts that should not have appeared in this world. This was more than enough of a reason for her to act against the three of them. "Master, Ziying and I have not fully recovered yet, so we're not Protector Shui's opponent at the moment. However, we can nullify the coldness in your body. You can break free in a while as long as you cooperate, and you must immediately leave the icy plains as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the coldness will be increased by several levels the next time Protector Shui moves, and will be helpless against it at that time," Ziying sternly explained. "I understand. Ziying, Qing Suo, let's start," said Jian Chen. The two balls of light in Jian Chen's sea of consciousness began to glow brighter and brighter. They shot out from his sea of consciousness like swords while the two balls of light revolved around each other. However, they avoided contact as they shot toward Jian Chen's dantian with lightning-like speed. The two balls of light were like a miniature sun. All of the coldness that they came in contact with along the way melted away. The lights arrived at Jian Chen's dantian and the frost around his chaotic Niden rapidly dispersed, allowing Jian Chen to regain control over his chaotic Niden. Jian Chen immediately made his chaotic Niden to spit out strands of chaotic force without requiring a warning from the sword spirits. The chaotic force then worked with the power of the sword spirits as it swam through his body, rapidly cleansing the coldness. A few seconds later, a great bang suddenly rang through the icy plains. Jian Chen broke free from the thin layer of frost on him, and without any hesitation, he immediately shot into the sky, flying away as a blur. He left the icy plains as quickly as he could. "Master, we've used a lot of energy. We'll have to sleep for some time. We'll only awaken if Master faces fatal danger or if heavenly resources that pique our interest appear." Ziying's voice was slightly weak, and he made no more sounds after that. Jian Chen entered his sea of consciousness again, and indeed, he found the sword spirits to have darkened. Clearly, they had expended a lot of energy to purge the coldness. Back at the Ice Goddess Hall, Protector Shui was still standing where she had been before. She had not moved at all, so she stood there like an ice sculpture as she contemplated things. Suddenly, a gleam of light flashed through her eyes. She glanced in the direction of Jian Shen before losing interest again. Her cold eyes swept past Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu's origin energy treasures as if she was deep in thought. Suddenly, her cold eyes erupted with a dazzling light. Immediately, the surrounding temperature plummeted and became even colder than ancient ice caverns. She slowly clenched her fist as destructive energy condensed around her hand. She coldly said, "I understand. I finally understand. No wonder I always felt like something was wrong with you as I surveyed you with my presence. So you had discovered me long ago, and you had purposefully acted like that to fool me. Impressive. Very impressive. What an impressive Mo Tianyun. What an impressive winged tiger god." Her voice became colder and colder, chillier and chillier as her fury became stronger and stronger. She suddenly looked in the direction of the Tian Yuan continent. A huge, stone statue was reflected in her cold pupils. It was the sculpture that stood in the center of Mercenary City. The next moment, the sculpture disappeared from her eyes and was replaced by a huge divine hall that stood 99 floors high. It was the supreme divine hall of the Beast God continent, the Beast God Hall. Just who are you, winged tiger god and Mo Tianyun? To even trick this king, Protector Shui gritted her teeth. She felt like she had been fooled by the winged tiger god and Mo Tianyun. This was utterly shameful to her, an embarrassment that could never be washed away. Protector Shui suddenly swung out and 3 finger-like arrows of ice condensed out of nowhere. They immediately shot toward the 3 origin energy weapons that had been frozen, and with 3 crisp sounds, the sacred dragon sword, the scorching god fire hairpin, and He Yu's machete were split in half, falling onto the frozen ground with a clatter. Jian Shen found the saint artifact and returned to the Changyang clan in Lore City in a rather dispirited fashion. He locked himself in his room and did not take a single step out. After returning from the Ice Goddess Hall, Yu Fengyan's mood took a great turn for the better. Her face was full of life within the next few days while the worry on her face had disappeared. Her haggard face improved with each coming day. Jian Shen remained in his room for the next few days, and no one came to disturb him. He currently sat on his bed with a dull, high-class monster core in his hand as he worked hard to absorb the energy inside. The monster core originated from within the artifact space. It had already existed for several tens of thousands of years. After being eaten away by time, it could not even be called a monster core, but something that was between a rock and a monster core. Not only had most of the energy leak away, any residue left had basically solidified, making absorption extremely difficult. After feeling just how helpless he was when Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had been trapped, it stimulated his desire to become powerful. He locked himself up to cultivate as soon as he had returned to the clan. Jian Shen did not touch the monster cores in his space ring. They all originated from the Heaven's Incense School. After giving Bai Lian and Xiao Bao a lot of them, he did not have much left, and even if he absorbed all of them, he would not be able to reach the 4th layer of his chaotic body. He could only forcefully absorb the large pile of monster cores in the Saint artifact since his cultivation method was special and he was in possession of the chaotic body. If it were someone else, even Saint Kings, they would not be able to absorb the energy that had almost solidified, which was why Jian Shen decided to refine these monster cores first. He also understood that even if he refined all the monster cores in the artifact space as well as the ones in his space ring, it would still not be enough to elevate him to the 4th layer. However, it could strengthen his chaotic Niden at the very least. With each layer of the chaotic body, the energy needed to progress to the next was at least several times more than the previous stage, even 10 times more. The resources required to progress from the 3rd layer to the 4th layer were unimaginable. In the blink of an eye, Jian Shen had already been in seclusion for several days. He had refined many monster cores in those days, but the effects were basically non-existent. His chaotic Niden was still the same size. It had not changed at all. Jian Shen could not even feel it grow. Jian Shen, the worldly ebb is about to happen. It will erupt in the next few days, so make your preparations and come to the sea realm as soon as possible. At this moment, the sea goddess' obscure voice rang through his head. It was extremely gentle and pleasant. Jian immediately stopped cultivating. He slowly opened his eyes. Just hard work was not enough to make his chaotic body reach another level. He required luck. Chapter 1228, Changyang's transformation. It's about time I complete my promise to the sea goddess, but I never thought that the day of the worldly ebb would have approached so quickly, Jian mumbled to himself. He was not surprised by the fact that the sea goddess could find him with great precision. Although she had already lost her fleshy body, her soul was even more powerful than in ancient times. She could easily engulf the entire Tianyuan continent or the beast god continent. Jian got off the bed. He had no idea how much time he would spend in the sea realm after leaving, so he needed to sort some things out beforehand. This included dealing with the flame mercenaries. They risked suffering the revenge of those from the Underworld sect who had managed to escape. Ahu. Ahu, don't go. Don't leave your mother. You're my only son. I can't be without you. Ahu. Just when Jian opened the door, his first aunt's sorrowful voice rang out from afar. Jian was stunned, but he seemed to think of something soon. His expression immediately changed a little as he ran over. From afar, Jian could see his eldest brother hovering 10 meters in the air with his white robes. He did not give off any rippling of energy and was not hovering in the air like a heaven saint master. At the same time, Jian did not sense the saint's ruler's abilities from him. Changyang was levitating in the air through a method that Jian did not know or understand. There was an indescribably and unexplainable charm about Changyang, making him seem otherworldly, as if he was a transcended immortal. It was a divine charm. Below, Ling Long looked at him with her head raised. Tears constantly poured from her eyes since she was in utter sorrow. She sobbed as she pleaded with him. A group of guards had already surged over, and even Yu Fengyan, Bai Yushuang, Bai Yuntian, and Changyang Ba had hurried over. All of them looked at Changyang in unease. Jian heart sank. He knew that the exact thing that he did not want to happen had finally happened. He took a step and instantly traversed over 100 meters, arriving before Changyang. Brother. Looking at Changyang's emotionless face, Jian could not help but call out in worry, as if he was trying to awaken Changyang. Changyang was very calm. His gaze was extremely bright at times, clear and transparent like two luminous pearls, which were filled with wisdom and willpower, yet at other times, it was dark, profound like the starry sky. It seemed to contain a whole different world inside, everything in fact. It was extremely profound and difficult to explain. Brother, I will be leaving, Changyang said to Jian as he calmly looked at him. He bore a smile. When he said brother, it had become indifferent, having lost its sincerity long ago. At that moment, Jian felt like his brother had become a different person. He was so strange that Jian could not find any familiarity at all. All the times that he had spent with him in Kargath Academy flashed through Jian head like a movie, making his heart ache. He had realized that his brother had severed his kinship, which was why he had become so unfamiliar. The brother in his memories had ceased to exist. From that day on, his close brother only lived in his memories. Brother, have you really severed your kinship? Are you really willing to see first and in so much pain? Jian voice slightly trembled. He still wanted to see if he could turn Changyang back. Changyang remained smiling throughout the exchange. His expression did not change at all with what Jian said. He looked into the distant space with his profound eyes and said, "The world is emotionless. We were born from the world, and we follow the path provided by the world to comprehend it. The impurities of worldly affairs are like strands of a demonic presence, obscuring the wisdom of people and misleading their hearts. Only by transcending worldly affairs can one regain their original awareness, and thus, see through all the mysteries of the world. The life of a mortal is like a dream. When a person is born, the dream begins. When they die, the dream ends. Everything that happens in the dream seems real and fake, but it will all be reduced to a void in the end. The dream seems fake so it cannot be real, and it seems real but it is not real. These are the so-called emotions and desires. They are illusory, and only by abandoning the worldly affairs can you return to your original conscience. Only by understanding the truth and severing the false can you be at peace, stand true to fate, see through the mysteries of the world, and witness the supreme all. With that, Changyang who drifted away. He moved away extremely freely, without any reluctance. Jianchen fell silent. He hovered in the sky as he watched Changyang who gradually grow further away. His heart ached. He knew that Changyang who had completely severed everything. The current him probably no longer maintained any connections of family. He was only an unchanging spirit to comprehend the world. He had embarked on a different path. Jianchen became rather depressed at that moment. He was in a horrible mood. He had just lost Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu, and now he had lost the brother he respected the most. Although he had the ability to make his brother forcefully stay, he did not do that. He knew that all of it would result in nothing. Changyang whose path had already been determined and could no longer be changed. Ahu, Ling Long's heart shattered like glass after Changyang whose straightforward departure. She cried out in sorrow before fainting. First madam, several female servants paled in fright as they hurried up to catch her. Take her back to her room to rest, Changyang Ba said in dejection as well. His mood was extremely heavy. Jianchen stared in the direction Changyang who had disappeared in for quite some time before deeply sighing. He returned to the ground in low spirits. Xianger, come here, Bai Yuntian arrived beside Jianchen and grabbed his arm. After witnessing what had happened with Changyang Hu, Bai Yuntian became rather scared inside. She was afraid that she would lose her child just like Ling Long. Xianger, can you tell your father what happened to your brother? Changyang Ba asked in pain. He could sense that his first son had probably become a thing of the past. Jianchen thought silently before he replied, brother's chosen a path that's suitable for him. He's embarked on a unique cultivation path. I have no idea what will happen in the future. A white-robed person stood on a tree branch as he watched Changyang who walk away from Lore City. He mumbled, looks like Changyang who has gotten past the final stage. His great liberation is complete. He has finally reached this step. Jianchen delayed his journey to the sea realm by a day due to what had happened with Changyang Hu. On the next day, he visited the flame mercenaries to sort out some matters before properly comforting Bai Yuntian. He promised that he would return after dealing with his matters. He then set off for the sea realm with Nubis. Emerging from a space gate, Jianchen and Nubis hovered above the vast sea. They felt the calmness of the sea as well as the gentle sea breeze. A comfortable, easy feeling immediately bloomed within Jianchen, pushing away all the unhappiness from his brother's departure the day before. With the sea goddess' assistance, Jianchen and Nubis passed through the barrier without any obstructions. At the same time, the sea goddess' voice rang in their heads, the worldly ebb will be erupting soon. I will keep paying close attention to the situation, so spend a few days in the sea realm and wait for my news. Yes, your majesty, Jianchen politely replied. Hesitating slightly, he then said to the empty space, your majesty, I have something that I would like to inquire about. May I ask if you know about Protector Shui of the Ice Goddess Hall? Jianchen knew that the sea goddess basically existed everywhere, so she definitely would have heard what he said. An illusionary, hazy woman silently appeared before him right after he finished speaking. She sternly asked, why are you asking about the Ice Goddess Hall? Do you want to visit that place? Before Jianchen could reply, she followed up with, I've never heard of a Protector Shui of the Ice Goddess Hall, but the Ice Goddess Hall is an extremely terrifying place. From the ancient times till now, countless saint emperors have entered those icy plains, but less than a tenth have returned alive. I once tried to investigate the depths of the icy plains using my soul, but as soon as my soul approached that place, it would be frozen by an extremely terrifying coldness. It would even use my soul as a guide and quickly travel toward the sea realm. If I had not pulled back my soul fast enough, the outcome would have been unthinkable. The sea goddess' voice was filled with a lingering fear. It was evident just how terrifying that area was for the sea goddess, who belonged to the origin realm. Afterward, the winged tiger god gave me the Empyrean demon orb and also warned me to never investigate the place no matter what unless the icy plains disappear from the Arctic. That was why I never looked into that area again. The sea goddess' voice was filled with some mixed emotions. Her soul was extremely powerful. Not only could it engulf the entire sea realm, she could extend it as she wished into the Tianyuan continent, the beast god continent, and even the wasteland continent. Without any exaggeration, her soul could move freely throughout the entire world. There was nothing that could threaten her, including the most dangerous place on the Tianyuan continent, the Death Nest, except for the Ice Goddess Hall, a region forbidden for her to enter. Your Majesty, then may I inquire when the Ice Goddess Hall appeared? Jianchen asked again. The sea goddess was a sovereign-like figure of the same era as Mo Tianyun. She knew many more secrets than Saint Emperors. The Ice Goddess Hall seemed to have always existed. No one knows when it first appeared, but the people of the organization rarely ever visit the Tianyuan continent. Every time they appear, they visit the continent in search of disciples, and they handle everything with an extremely low profile, said the sea goddess. She did not know the answer to Jianchen's question either. At this moment, Jianchen thought about how the sword spirits had described Protector Shui as someone who had come down from above. In that case, did it mean that the organization was founded by Protector Shui? Jianchen asked again after thinking up to that point, Your Majesty, if you surpass Saint Emperor, is it possible to live for more than 1,000,000 years? The sea goddess shook her head. Beyond Saint Emperor is the origin realm. It has 3 subdivisions, which are receival, returnance, and reciprocity. With my understanding, those of the origin realm can only live for 100,000 years, and even people who have reached reciprocity cannot live longer than 200,000 years after ingesting various heavenly resources to extend their life. Perhaps only cultivation realms beyond that will allow you to live longer. Of course, if there is any heaven-defying treasures, you may be able to live for 1,000,000 years or even longer. However, even if that's the case, they'll end up the same as me, only able to maintain a soul while the body will be gone. At the same time, the soul will not be able to separate itself from the treasure that protects it. Jianchen became extremely depressed. He had already guessed that Protector Shui probably had already surpassed the origin realm, having reached an even greater level. He could not become happy over this no matter what, as the stronger Protector Shui was, the more unlikely he would be able to save Roy Jean and the others. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.